presentation has the slideshow.
Yes, and that one has your guys' pictures.
Okay, is it a different one? Because I did look at the one that
The
you
one
made.
that you sent me.
Okay, cool.
Your jail one.
Anything else? Clusters introduce
Is she photoing? Yeah. That is her picture. Yawning when my mouth open. They're here at the panel.
Okay, I think we're going to get started. This is a great room. I want remind everybody, look around. Look around, look at everybody. Make eye contact, don't be afraid. You're in good company. This is beautiful. This is our New Mexico, and we have the power and the resources and the knowledge to make what needs to happen to make our communities better. So I just want to thank you all again for your time today, spending it here, sharing your stories, making the connections, finding the solutions. We can do it together. I'm here for it. I'm so excited. I think this next panel is probably one of the most important that we're going to hear from today, right? The young people. Everybody always talks about them, but we don't always hear from them. So I'm just very excited about this next panel. I'm going to be all ears, and I hope we have time at the end for questions because we want to ask them and pick their brains for the solutions that can make our communities better. So I'm so excited to introduce Ms. Tania Tijerina from 2nd Judicial District Court. Thank you.
Let me adjust a little bit because obviously she's a little bit taller than me. So my name is Tanya, and I'm the Clinical Operations Manager with 2nd Judicial District Court. And I oversee several of the adult-level treatment court programs. And today, we are here with a very special presentation, like Commissioner said. I worked together with Coral Mendez Flores, who is the Program Manager for Young Adult Court, and with Jordan Masters, who is a director at Serenity Mesa Treatment Center. And what we did was we worked together to bring to you the most important speakers of the day. And those speakers are our young people. So we've heard from people who are involved in the criminal justice system. We've heard from family members who have lost someone to fentanyl addiction. We've heard from a variety of professionals. But who we haven't heard from are the young people that are out there fighting this battle. And so today we want to show you both sides. We want to show you and we want to talk to you about what addiction looks like, how it starts. And we also want to talk to you about recovery and hope, because the young people that we have here today to share their stories are going to talk to you about the journey that they've been on, how things started, the struggles that they went through, and where they're at now. So the takeaway really is, how do we work with young people, and how do we continue to instill hope in everyone that we touch, and in everyone that we see and we serve. And these young people, that's what they are, their hope. With that, I'm going to ask that each of our panelists introduce themselves very quickly, and then we're going to hop into some questions.
My name's Dominique. I'm 29 years old, and I've been sober for 4 years, 1 month, and 2 days.
My name's Ryland Olivas. I've been clean from fentanyl for a year. I'm 19.
I'm Vincent. I'm 23 years old, and I've been clean a year and 6 months.
My name is Jordan. I'm 25 years old, and I've been sober for a year and a half.
My name's Andrea. I'm 29 years old, and I've been sober for 6 years and 1 day.
My name is Michael Benavides. I am 24 years old, and I've been clean for 23 months.
Recovery is possible, right? Recovery is possible. And that's what we're here to represent, and that's what we're here to talk about. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Jordan, and she's going to start with asking the youth from Serenity Mesa questions, and then Coral will continue with asking questions and allowing those from Young Adult Court to share their story with you. There you go.
So I think that the most important part, if we can all on the panel summarize how you kind of got exposed to fentanyl or opioids and what kind of was alluring about them.
Okay. So I was exposed to opiates at a very young age. I started using opiates when I was 13 years old. I used them until I was 17 when I got sober because I got pregnant with my son. And then in 2020, fentanyl really started to come out and hit the streets in the pill form, and a lot of my friends started using it. One of my best friends ended up overdosing and dying, and I really didn't know how to cope with it. So I just started using again. I had a reoccurrence of use, and I just started using fentanyl just to numb the pain. And yeah, that's how I started using fentanyl. And it just kind of spiraled out of control, and I kept thinking I had it under control because I wasn't smoking it, I was snorting it, and I thought, oh, I can stop whenever I want. But then before I knew it, I was having to snort another pill every hour because it wasn't lasting anymore. And then, yeah, that's how I started using.
Similar to Dom, I was exposed to fentanyl at a pretty young age, about 13. I started using Vicodin. It was more recreational until fentanyl came out. It was a lot cheaper. It just happened to be at a party one day. I tried it. I noticed how fast you get physically addicted to it. So it was something I hadn't really experienced before. It's an animal. It takes you over in a week, 2 weeks, and you're dependent on it. But yeah, that's how I started.
I started fentanyl at 15 years old. I started using because I guess kind of an escape, a way to kind of cope with things that were going on at home. And yeah.
I started using fentanyl at the age of 20 years old. My son's father was using it at the time. I did it because I started to notice when I started using drugs, I was getting more attention from men. I had money. There was things that I thought I could accomplish by doing drugs. Because I was doing drugs, I lost my son, but now I have full custody of him. And that's how I started using fentanyl.
So I started using heroin actually at the age of 19, and I started using because I grew up in a household full of use, and I was also trying to escape the mental things that I was going through at home, and I was also in a relationship with someone who was fully addicted to heroin already.
The first time I used fentanyl was for suicidal tendencies. I wanted to overdose, I guess you could call it. Yeah.
So what did you guys know about fentanyl before you used it?
I really just knew it was dangerous. It was lethal. And like Michael said down there, I was kind of using it in the purpose of, I really just didn't want to be here no more because I didn't know how to cope with the emotions I was feeling. But it was new on the streets, and we just knew it was it was a different feeling. It wasn't like any other opiate. A lot of people think that is similar to heroin or to just popping perks or regular oxys, but it's not. It's a whole different feeling that you get when you're doing fentanyl.
Yeah, I knew it was like an anesthetic. I knew it was a lot more powerful than heroin or oxy. Yeah, I mean, simple Google, but yeah.
When I started using, I was unaware for a while until the effects of fentanyl and what it really was until I started trying to educate myself, and I had went to a treatment center.
Before I started doing fentanyl, I knew that it brought a lot of money. I knew it was addictive. I knew it was a downer. I never did downers, but because I never did it, I was okay to try it. And that's
So when I was using fentanyl, really wasn't big on the streets. But if it were different back then, I probably would have been using it. But at the time, it was more heroin. So I did know that heroin was highly addictive, and I hear and see a lot in my work that fentanyl is, like they say, earlier, it is very lethal, and it controls your whole life.
The only thing I knew about fentanyl before I was introduced to it was that people were definitely killing for it. That's what my brother was murdered over, was fentanyl.
So an additional question that I have is, did social media play a role in fentanyl use, whether it was purchasing, using, influence? If it did, can you tell us about that?
Most definitely had a big influence on it. It made it easy to access. You just seen that little M, that little blue M on there, and you knew that they had it, and you knew where you could get it. You could get on Snapchat, and people left and right were posting that they had it for sale, and it was just so easy to access.
Yeah, there's like a fentanyl emoji. It's like a blue M box. So people just post that, you can get it. And there's like apps like Telegram, Signal. It's very easy to buy any drug you want on those.
Yeah, I would say at a point it was like really accessible. It was just a matter of just sending a message. There was a lot, pretty much at the time, everyone I knew was selling fentanyl.
I started posting about, I guess, fentanyl on social media when I started to see that there was a lot of group chats with people that did not care to tell people where to go pick up these drugs or meet new people. You never know who you're going to meet. And on social media is one easiest way to find a drug. And at that, you don't know who you're really meeting or anything, which causes a lot of more chaos with being hooked on fentanyl.
So social media made it definitely easier to access drugs in general. For me, it's usually just Facebook at the time, but it was definitely easy to find. And not only that, just the people in my life were all on drugs, so it was pretty much everywhere.
Me personally, I was always too paranoid to post it on my story, but I knew that's how I use social media to sell it to a lot of people.
So kind of going off of the social media aspect, something that Jordan said to me kind of stands out is like the lifestyle that comes with the use of fentanyl. I think it is very much glamorized in pop culture. How do you feel like the glamorization of in movies, music kind of played a role in your active use?
I don't think it really had an effect in my use, to say, but I do hear it now. Like, I wasn't noticing it when I was using, and I think it's just because it was so normalized in my life at the time. But now when I listen to music, I hear like how these rappers are glorifying it and making it seem like it's cool until one of those rappers are dead, and now all the other rappers are like RIP. But if they're gonna be like that, then they shouldn't be glamorizing at all, because it's not anything to glamorize.
I think all drugs are glamorized. Drinking's glamorized. I think the biggest thing is that they glamorize the expensive drugs. They glamorize Percocet, lean, stuff that's like thousands of dollars to maintain. Normal people can't afford those addictions, and they turn to meth, they turn to fentanyl, heroin. I don't think fentanyl is particularly glamorized in particular, but opiates are. And I don't think people realize that it's a slippery slope going from Percocet to fentanyl, how fast it can happen and how addicting all drugs can be.
Yeah, I think it's glamorized whether it's selling it or using it. I think it's just glamorized to a point where it seems appealing to the youth because I think a lot of people just ain't educated on what it really does and how it affects people.
I think that rapping never had or like the music and stuff never really had effect on about me doing the drugs, but as I started to notice the music I was listening to as I am doing drugs, as I'm selling drugs, it felt more powerful to be able to say certain words that a rap would say and be like, oh yeah, I live that. So I felt more cool. These people that have money and stuff are glamorizing it. I can do it, and I felt cool.
So I feel like, not only just the music, but the movies just kind of motivate that fast life living and that easy money. But at the end of the day, when we're young or you're just naive, we don't really know the long-term effects of that life. It comes with death and a lot of other pain. But I do think that that it's just really about that fast life and fast money when they're talking about those things in their music and about the movies as well.
I think that rap songs and movies give a false hope to anybody that's in the streets or dealing with addiction or as a drug dealer, thinking that like movies like with the whole like the Scarface movie, like that's a false hope. Like nobody's just gonna be a regular guy in the street and become like one of the biggest cocaine dealers in the world. Like that's insane. Or like even in the raps, like, oh, I became rich from the streets, not the industry, which is definitely false too.
So oftentimes, in our profession, it is, yeah, I think we have something
For you.
thanks. Oh. So oftentimes it is, the belief that we know or they know what substances we were using and how that happened. So my question to you guys is, did you guys know you guys were consuming fentanyl when you guys tried fentanyl?
Definitely. I knew I was using fentanyl because it was already so big on the streets that, like, we knew if you were hitting someone up to buy pills or buy blues off the street that it was going to have fentanyl in it. It didn't matter, not even just the blues, Xanax, whatever pills you were buying off the streets. If you weren't testing them and knowing for sure that there wasn't fentanyl in it, there was most likely fentanyl in it.
Yeah, I mean, when I started doing fentanyl, I knew I was doing fentanyl. But I think before that, when I was taking Xans, we kind of knew they were pressed with fentanyl or pressed with other things. We just kind of took them anyway.
When I first started using, I actually I didn't know it was fentanyl. Well, yeah, at first I didn't know it was fentanyl. I was actually at the time looking for Xanax, and a friend had told me that he pretty much had morphine 30s, which at the time he thought it was a morphine 30. Later on, I found out it was fentanyl.
I knew I was smoking fentanyl because it's what I asked for, and the people I was around made it clear to me that it was. So it was more of a choice that I chose to do.
So it's been confirmed that I was not using fentanyl through my probation office. They did confirm it, that none of my tests did come out with fentanyl. So again, I never had to use fentanyl.
So I had just found out right before this that I was using fentanyl a lot longer than I thought. I only intentionally used fentanyl once, but I had just gotten, and that was on August 15th of 2022 when I had tried to commit suicide. But I just got told, I got shown like my script of UAs, and I had like 10 to 15 failed drug tests that had fentanyl in it.
And we're definitely seeing that more and more where substances have more than one thing in them. Not everyone is truly aware of what they're taking, and I think as providers, professionals, parents, and even people that struggle with substance use, that's something that we really need to be aware of. What are we actually, what's actually in the drug, right? What is actually being consumed, and the dangers around that. So many times in our treatment court programs, we know that we're testing for a multitude of things, and someone may believe that they're just using one thing, but when the results come back, very much like Michael said, there's substances that they weren't even aware of. And that's really good to know. I want to switch gears just a bit and talk to you guys and ask you guys questions about when did your journey to recovery begin? So we're talking about how it started, things that influenced you, but where did your journey to recovery begin? How did that happen? And a lot of people here, that's the big question, is how do you get a person from active use to a place where they will contemplate and they will try going into treatment and changing their life? Because I want to believe, and I think most people believe, that when you're in active addiction, there's a part of you that truly wants to change, that truly doesn't want to stay where you're at, that truly doesn't want to be in pain or suffer, be sick, or even hurt the people you love, right? But what was the defining moment for you?
For me, the moment was I had overdosed, and by the grace of God, my husband had gotten home right there, and at that time we were separated because I was using. And I kind of got the ultimatum, and to me, my kids are my life. Like, that's the whole reason why I got sober in the first place. And he literally gave me the ultimatum. It was either get clean or I could get out and go live on the streets and party and use and do whatever I want to do, but I wasn't going to see my kids. And all I could think is I was just living in this cycle that I lived in. Like, I was just giving him the same childhood that I grew up in, with parents of addicts, and seeing him overdose and seeing him use and seeing him hustle. And I didn't want that. So I detoxed at home. I didn't go to treatment. I didn't use any MAT. And I detoxed, and I went to some meetings. And every day when I look at my kids, they're just the reason why I have to stay on the straight path and stay sober, because I have to give them the childhood and the life that I never got to have.
I guess my recovery journey started like 2 to 3 years ago. I overdosed and went to like a hospital for a while, but they released me pretty shortly after, and there was no aftercare for another month. So I managed to stay clean for that month, but on that relapse, I overdosed again. This time I went to rehab, and I guess it's just been a bumpy road. To finally get a year clean, it took a couple relapses. I think the biggest thing that helped me is I sought out spiritual healing. I saw curandera, and I thank her for the reason that I'm clean from fentanyl right now.
My journey two things I think kind of motivated me to start looking for recovery. One of those things being there was this time I had lost a pill at my sister's house, and I guess just that fear of my little niece getting it kind of motivated me to not wanting to use around family. And I think another thing that was kind of a motive was I guess just my morals that like I grew up with, like just started to change, and that was kind of a thing that kind of led to me trying to find recovery.
My journey started November 16th of last year. I was released to young adult court. The only difference upon my completion or my conditions of release was if I did not complete young adult court, I was going to do 5.5 years of prison. I personally, not as anybody made for prison, but I was scared of prison. I have a 4-year-old son. I know I wasn't there for him previous, but being away longer was what scared me. Another thing that motivated me was to know that I have people who don't know me that believe in me. I've always craved that attention from my family to believe in me, and I have a better support system now. My family is very supportive. Also, I realized that I can get the same attention that I was craving from doing drugs, from all the wrong people, from all the right people today, to be able to, people to hear and believe me, is what really made me and pushed me to my recovery.
So a lot like Jordan, my recovery journey started with the young adult court and being accepted and inducted into the program. But not then did I take it serious. I really didn't take my recovery serious until I was sitting in jail once again, facing 4 years in prison and being served with papers saying that my rights to my children were going to be terminated. And at the time, they were both little babies, and I just could not move on that way and leave them with strangers. So they are my number one motivation.
My recovery journey started with my old officer not letting me go to prison and making me go to Darren's place with young adult court. And that was probably the best thing that could have happened to me, because at that point when that happened, I already had given up on who I was as a person, and I was just going to let my soul go to the streets. And I didn't care if I lived, died, or breathed. It didn't matter to me what was going to happen to me. But without young adult court seeing that light in me and having that faith, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to anybody right now.
What are some of the things you learned in early recovery that you still practice or believe to this day that helps you maintain recovery?
I think one of the biggest things I've learned is self-love. I think if you don't love yourself, then there's no way you're ever going to stay sober. Growing up in a toxic household, like, I was raised to learn how to survive, not to live. And just being able to learn how to live and love myself, and being able to love myself enough to stay sober is amazing, really, coming from the background where I come from.
My biggest takeaway from the first time I was in rehab was never quit quitting. I liked that phrase. They say relapse is a part of recovery, but I think as long as you maintain the fact that you don't want to be on that drug, that you'll have a lot of motivation. I also think staying busy is like the biggest thing you can do. Finding hobbies, things you love, people you love, good people. For me, it's art, expressing myself, writing, drawing. Those things are essential, because if you're just sitting around the house all day, you're going to want to get high. Yeah, thank you.
So a big thing that kind of helped me is, like, there's this NA saying, it works if you work it. And I feel like, if you're constantly working on your recovery, eventually you will be successful in that recovery.
Something that helps me every day with my recovery is to realize the triggers that I have in my life and cause me to feel a type of way. Something I've always avoided is my feelings. So the fact that I can figure out the triggers and figure out different coping skills that will help me in my life, to be able to sit back and think about the situations I'm in or things I'm going through has really helped me. Also, surrounding myself with the right people. Something I've struggled with my whole life is always hanging around with the wrong people, and I finally got to change that.
So the biggest thing that I think I took away in early recovery was getting myself a coping toolbox. Life stressors and family stressors gave me the reason that I thought I just wanted to use and numb myself. So having coping skills and not getting complacent within my recovery, that was just the biggest thing for me. And continuing to use those skills today, I use thought stopping on a regular and 4 square breathing all the time, and I recommend them to, people that I see at work or just friends. But I do constantly redirect those thoughts and surround myself with people who are in recovery or, doing the same work that I do.
One of the most important things that I took from being in treatment and early recovery was change. I was very complacent on how I lived, and I didn't agree with change. I didn't like change. I didn't like changing the people out of my life. But in order for me to be successful in my recovery, I knew I had to let go of everybody and just kind of like isolate to myself, because that was the only thing that was going to get me to stay sober. It was being to myself. And I mean, it worked. I'm here.
So change in recovery is different for everybody. I wanted to ask, are any of you on medication-assisted treatment? And if you guys can share and elaborate your journey with us.
Okay. So I'm not currently on medicated assisted treatment, but it played a huge role in my recovery. I remember just being inducted into the young adult court. I tried doing it without methadone, and it did not work. Even when I first got on methadone, it didn't work. I was still using along with the methadone. It took me a while to really get myself just to be on the methadone. But I was on methadone for, I think it was 3 years. And it really helped me. The thoughts went away. And it was really just helping my mind. Didn't help my body very much, but it did help my mind. And I titrated off of methadone, 2 milligrams every 2 weeks until I got down to the last 2 milligrams. And even then, I told the doctor if he could split the last 2 milligrams into 1, just because it was going to make my thoughts feel better. And not even just the other day, I was cleaning out some old cabinets and found my old methadone box, and I found that old 1 milligram bottle that I never drank, and it was just amazing looking at it because there was nothing in the bottle. But it still had something in there, but it was completely clear. But just knowing that it was there really helped me. And I was told that, oh, you've been on methadone for years, it's saturated in your body, you're gonna get so sick still no matter how slow you go. I didn't get sick at all. I really didn't. So I am successfully off of methadone.
I am currently on Suboxone. For that reason, my father has been a recovering addict from heroin for 10 years. He got onto Suboxone, and it was just something I felt that would be safer for me when I got out. I haven't gave it a try to be without it. I'm hoping that soon I'll be able to get off of it because I'm not too far on it, but it has helped me as of right now.
So as you can see, everybody's journey looks different. And that's kind of what we want to shed a light on, is everybody's journey is going to be different. Earlier today, someone said, you have to meet someone where they're at. And basically, that's accepting them exactly how they come and asking them what the next steps need to be. It's not our steps, it's their steps. We're here to walk alongside them, to listen, to be understanding, to know that it's not going to be a perfect path. I think Judge Leo said it best earlier. She said, as long as they're trying, we'll keep them in the program forever. And that's what it's about. It's working with someone forever, because this is a journey. But it's worth it. No matter how hard, that journey is worth it. So as we get ready to close, because we do want to ask if anybody has questions, I want to ask each of the panelists to please share with us. Got it? Well,
Come on.
I think I need to be out of training. No, just kidding. I want to ask each of the panelists, where are you today? Tell us about what you're doing today.
I am currently a case manager and CPSW at Serenity Mesa. I love working with the youth, and I love just giving them the support that I didn't get when I was their age, because I feel like if they could see that it is possible, that they'll make their dreams come true.
Yeah, so I recently graduated the Serenity Mesa program. I'm now in housing. Yeah. But yeah, I'm just working on my writing, my drawing, and trying to get an apartment soon.
I'm currently working at Amazon. I've been there for 2 years. And I guess just overall, like, just the being clean as long as I've been clean is just a major success in my life.
Today, I am a full-time mother. I am a motivational speaker for New Mexico's gun violence prevention. I believe that's what it's called, correct? Sorry, I forgot.
Mexicans Against Gun Violence.
I do go to schools and talk to kids from high schools and middle schools, and it is the greatest thing ever. Being that I never knew that I would have that opportunity unless I got these charges. So that's what I am doing today.
So today I am too a full-time mom of 2. I am a certified peer support worker. I work as a peer case manager for Albuquerque Center for Hope and Recovery. And I am an alumni coordinator for the Young Adult Court.
I work for the city of Albuquerque, and I am also an alumni coordinator for the Young Adult Court and a peer mentor. And I'm working on getting my son back. It's going pretty good.
Again, recovery is possible, right? We see it right here. Good job, you guys. Good job.
If you guys want to hear about our stories on a little bit personal level, we're going to be in room 113, right? And that's when we're going to go in there and tell it. Oh, just kidding, 112. I was just making sure everybody was on their toes. Yeah, but we're going to be in room 112, and if you want to know like us on like more of a personal level, get a little bit more detail, that's the room we'll be in telling our stories.
Does anybody have questions? Oh, okay. You'll run it. Thank you.
Whoa. All right. I'm Messias. I'm also a fellow resident at the Serenity Mesa program, and I have a question. Actually, I want to know is like after going through the program and after going through either a rehabilitation center with other with people around you, is it a good thing to keep those people with you or keep their support by your side as you grow distant in your own journeys?
That's a loaded question. I've met people that are doing really well now. We're still good friends. I've also known people that have died after they left rehab. You know, some people continue to use at different levels. I know, pillheads that turned into alcoholics. I know people that just smoke weed now. It kind of depends. I think you have to be aware of how secure you are in your own journey. Can you surround yourself with people that are drinking? Can you surround yourself with people that are doing your DOC? The answer is no for a lot of people, but some people it is yes. So I think it depends. I think right when you get out of rehab, a lot of people are planning to go. They're planning their relapse while they're in rehab. You know, not everybody is, but some people are waiting till they get out to go use. So you got to be mindful of those sorts of things.
Amen.
Can I also touch on that question? So, okay, when I actually, one of my best friends right now, his recovery date is 2 weeks before mine. Me and him were at the same treatment center. We were neighbors at the Sober Living, and we're still best friends and workout partners to this day.
So one of the things that I think a couple of you talked about is being sort of hopeless and feeling that you really didn't care about the risk of using the drugs, that it might kill you. In fact, you kind of welcomed it. And what I'm curious about is two questions. How did you get to that point? And what can we do as a community when you're a young person feeling so hopeless? What can we do to deter somebody from taking the risk to even start using to begin with?
I would say there was a point when I was actively using where I had like this manic episode and I was like self-harming, and I got taken in the ambulance to the hospital, and it was so stigmatized, the fentanyl use, that they didn't want to offer no help. They literally was like, oh, she's using, like, just sign her discharge papers and let her go. So I think just the resources and making it, I think educating medical professionals on another level will definitely help people want to get help.
Stigma often comes up, and you're right, we absolutely have to address the stigma.
I don't think there's a lot of drug addiction without mental health. So I think it starts with mental health. That's probably the biggest reason that people want to use. So I think if there can be more funding sent to the kinds of officers that respond for mental health crises, that 988 number is really helpful. I think another reason people become so hopeless is the heroin romanticization, like welcoming death. I don't know what to say to somebody who is at that point, because I've been there myself, and the sad thing to say is that you're gonna have to hit a rock bottom of some sort to come back. It's a hard truth, but people that are in active addiction aren't always gonna want to hear what you have to say, and people have to make their own mistakes. But yeah.
So, I mean, I could only answer for me, right? I can't answer for nobody else, but what was missing for me was, I guess it was like more of an at-home thing, right? Because I grew up around drugs my whole life, and prison and gangs, that's all I knew. So it was very open to me. Even if I were to see it at school, if I saw it at school, it wasn't nothing to me, because I see it at home all the time, you know. And there was really no, with schools, there's so many teachers to how many students, you know, and not every single teacher is going to be able to keep an eye on every single student. So there's always going to be something in the shadows happening. At least that's what I was doing in high school, you know, or in middle school. It was real easy to not be seen, I guess, if that's the word I'm going to use, you know.
I have a question. My question is, as a lived experience mother, I lost my son in 22 to fentanyl poisoning. How, because of my age, how would I get through to youth of your age to listen. Like my son, he would listen, but there was no response. There was no, and my daughter at the same, well, she is younger than him. She's 4 years younger than him. Was in the same. They were in the same addiction. Thank God today she is alive. She is sober, 2 years sober. Thank you, thank you. My son did unfortunately lose his life, but how do I reach out to you, to more youth? Because I need to help save more. I need to help a mother save her daughter, save her son. I need to have a grandma save their granddaughter, their grandson. How do I do this?
So watching my mom go through my brother getting killed over fentanyl was the hardest thing, because she was in the same boat. She didn't know who to go to. She didn't have nobody to talk to about it, so she had to deal with those demons within herself. And the best thing I could do, there's so many organizations now due to a lot of mothers losing their kids to fentanyl. Like my friend Orlando, he's the third picture right here. I'm really good. That was one of my really good friends, and I'm really close with his mom, and she's was telling me about this organization. I can't remember the name for it, but it's like this huge group now for mothers who have lost their kids due to fentanyl use. And I wish that something like that was around when my brother was killed. Because watching my mom go through that was probably the most heartbreaking thing, and then watching all of us go through it was the heartbreaking thing.
I think just sharing that, well, for me, going through recovery, having people that believed in me, because I didn't have that at home, you know, people who had faith in me and encouraged me to do good, I think that makes a huge difference. So if maybe you want to reach out to the youth and you know just share that you believe in them and you believe that their lives can be great, you know.
In my experience, I have had great parents, great support. I think it hurt them more at the fact that they gave me the best life they could, and I still chose the path I chose. My parents started to live the life I lived because of they loved and they cared for me. One thing my mom did was start to realize the people that I loved and I cared for in my addiction, and reached out and helped them. Would always go to motels looking for me and, you know, make sure my friends are fed, make sure they have clothes. Just a lot of those people that don't have that is why I was out there, was to help them. And for my mom to help give that support to a lot of these people that didn't have that. To this day, I've seen a lot of people, I have friends that my mom has taken under her wing that are doing good. And that's what a lot of youngins out there really want, is just attention. A lot of us crave attention. So it does feel good to have that attention from, if you're not getting it from at home, to know that there's people that don't know you and that are willing to, you know, help you because they know what it's like. Well, I'm hoping help the world and other people.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Viviana. I also work for Serenity Meza. I've worked in behavioral intervention for 5 years, and I've worked all over the country. And in my personal experience, what I found is that in most places, there's not necessarily a lack of services or organizations, but a lack of education surrounding them, widespread education. My question for all of you is, being new to New Mexico myself, what organizations or services do you wish more people knew about?
I actually think this is a really good question, and it's probably a really good time for us to break because we have to get ready for the next panel. But if you're an organization or if you're part of a program and you're in this room, please stand up. Woo! Now, specifically, I'd like to also ask, if you're part of Young Adult Court or you're part of Serenity Mesa, please stand up. We are blessed to be in a room of people that are fighting for the lives of our young people. We are amongst a group of people that believe in change, that believe in recovery, and that aren't going to stop. So you brought up a great question. What organizations? And I'm proud to say that here in the state of New Mexico, in Bernalillo County, in Albuquerque, we have many organizations. Young Adult Court couldn't do it without the providers that are in this room, including Serenity Mesa. So I say thank you. I say thank you to Serenity Mesa. I say thank you to Nico. I say thank you to the Heroin Awareness Committee. I say thank you to ACS. And there's so many other programs. I could go on and on and on. But together, we have to fight this. Together, we have to stand up and take a stand and meet people right where they're at, because they can change and they do change. So let's leave with hope today. Thank you.
Okay, wow, thank you. I know we had so many more questions. We could stay here all day with our young people. Thank you to Tanya Zayarina, Young Adult Court, and all our folks from Second Judicial Court. Thank you again.
Let them know that the young people will be in room 112 at 3:15.
The young folks will be in room 112 at 3:30. Perfect. That was perfect. I'm going to ask for folks' attention, continued attention. Find the folks, and they're going to be in room 112 at 3:30. So make sure you seek them out. We have a first responders panel coming up. Hello. Yes, we have a first responders panel next. This is our public safety, health, and education. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. So get some water, use the bathroom, and come right back. Hello. All right. Hopefully you got a drink of water, got to chit chat and catch up a bit. Make those connections. This room has all the knowledge and answers we need, and we need you all to be talking about them and connecting on them and strategizing. There's going to be more great information for our day, for our afternoon. This is our first responders panel. If I could get folks to settle in. Thank you. So excited. Oh, I'm so excited to see this panel coming together. All right, and remember we have workshops going on, people using the bathroom, getting water, coffees, but we're gonna want to stay on time, so I'm gonna get us started. I think we have a critical mass.
Remember last time we did this? They had all of the females at one end. Oh, yes, I do remember.
This is our first responders panel, and we've been so fortunate. We have such great news in our city. All these anchors have come to offer and help moderate our panels today. We have Dean Staley from KRQE News 13 going to be moderating today's first responder panel. I want to make, just because I have the point of privilege with the microphone in my hand, just a bit of a comment. I think so much. I appreciated the last panel so much. And some of the questions that I hear too, so I often tell this story that, okay, I grew up like many New Mexicans. I went camping every single weekend when it was warm enough. My father and my mom got together that camper. It was on the truck the whole summer long. I was encouraged by my father to get into math and science. I learned how to ride a horse. I knew how to change the oil in my car. All these things were the things that my father ingrained in me, taught me how to be adventurous and catch a snake with my bare hands. And my father was a substance user from the time he was 15. He had used heroin from the time he was 14, and eventually when he did stop using heroin for a little bit, he turned to alcohol. So I share that story because, and I always start with the things that my father did that were so good to, I had this beautiful childhood. And I know the reason why I started telling the story with always explaining these great things that my father did for me was because any other time if I'd say, my father was a heroin user from the time he was 14, I just see this look on everybody's face like, oh, you poor child, you must have had the heart. And that wasn't my experience. And so I've resonated so much today with the people who are saying that there's 30,000 people that are functioning users around you, or that and the few that we see as visible are just the tip of the iceberg, right? And so I just want to make sure when we're asking questions like, what was missing from your life, or what was here, what was there, there's no one answer. There's no one fix. What I've learned through my own journey of being a child of a substance user and from the moms of the Keeping Them Alive, that being there with open arms and love and care, regardless, there's no missing piece, there's no fix, whatever the reason there, being there with open arms, love, and help. And that's all we could do. When they're ready, they know they have somewhere that they can go, that they can love and depend on. So yes, to all the things and how much we share and learn about our stories, I just wanted to say those few pieces, that's the way we end the stigma, is just talk about it and be open and ready to accept everybody, like Tanya Tijerina said, meet them where they're at when they need it with our love and care. So I am so excited to see this next panel, like I said, and we have Mr. Dean Staley from KRQE News 13 Anchor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank everyone for being here. For the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, this is a great turnout. It's wonderful to see just regular folks who care about this issue joining us this afternoon. So we appreciate you being here, and we thank you. I want to thank also Bernalillo County and all of their partners for inviting me. I'm Dean Staley. I'm the principal evening anchor at KRQE News 13. The CBS and the Fox affiliate here in Albuquerque. Really glad to be invited here. I feel honored. We have an amazing panel for you this afternoon of, really, you can't believe how many decades of experience you have sitting behind the table here, both in law enforcement, in harm prevention, in emergency management, emergency medical services. And we're just really blessed, I think, to have these folks to talk to and to answer your questions today. I will introduce everybody. If you could, when I say your name, just sort of raise your hand so that everyone knows who we're talking about. I don't think everyone can read the name, so if you would, panelists. And then I think maybe we'll go through a row of questions, and then maybe we'll open this up to people in the audience. Are there people in the audience who you think will have questions today? Show of hands? Okay, we'll try to get to you after we've asked some questions of our panelists. First off, I'd like to introduce Chief Deputy David Funes from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office. Chief, thanks for being here. Mr. Funes is the Chief Deputy over the Criminal Investigations Bureau with the BCSO and has been with the county for 21 years. He attended the Northwestern University Center for Public Safety and completed the School of Police Staff and Command. And throughout his career, he has served in various capacities, including the Criminal Investigations Division, High Enforcement Action Team, Street Crimes, Repeat Offender Program, as well as narcotics. Chief, we thank you for being here. We also have on the panel today Commander Kyle Hartsock, who's the commander of the Criminal Investigation Division at Albuquerque Police. The commander was first with the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, leading the Crime Strategies Unit at the DA's office. He's currently the commander of the Albuquerque Police Department's Criminal Investigations Division. And you should know that while at BCSO, he created the GHOST Unit, which pioneered a victim-centered response to human trafficking here in Albuquerque. At the DA's office, his team cracked New Mexico's first forensic genealogy case, solving a cold stranger sexual assault case of a runner in the Bosque. At APD, he started one of the state's first full-time mobile digital forensic units, and that, if you don't know, is a significant reason for APD doubling its clearance rate in the past 12 months. So, Commander, thanks for being here. Also on the panel today is Tawanda Thorne James. She is the DEA Special Agent in charge of the El Paso Division. And for those who don't know, the El Paso Division includes all of New Mexico. Special Agent in Charge Thorne James began her law enforcement career in 1993 as a police officer with the Philadelphia Police Department. She joined the DEA in 1998, became the Special Agent in charge of the DEA's El Paso Division on September 11th of 2023. In all, the division is responsible for 50 counties in 2 states, covering a total of 159,000 square miles. Special Agent in Charge Thorne James is highly decorated and throughout her career has been the recipient of numerous national as well as DEA awards, and that includes the esteemed DEA Administrator's Award of Valor, the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association National Bravery Award, the Women in Federal Law Enforcement Julie Y. Cross Award of Valor, as well as the International Narcotics Enforcement Officers Association Medal of Valor. Special Agent in Charge Thorne James, we appreciate you being here. Thank you. We also have with us today the Chief of Albuquerque Fire Rescue, Chief Emily Jaramillo. Chief, thanks for being here. She oversees emergency medical services and the firefighter safety, health, and wellness program for AFR. She joined AFR in 2005 and also spent time working as a firefighter paramedic in the field and in the AFR training division. Prior to joining AFR, in 2005, she taught language arts for Albuquerque Public Schools at the Bernalillo County Juvenile Detention Center. She obtained a BA from Luther College in 1999 in English education, and she is currently obtaining a Master of Public Health Policy degree at New Mexico State. Chief, thanks for being here. We also have on the panel Kylie Schurter, the Director of Prevention and Intervention Counseling Programs with Albuquerque Public Schools. She's in her 4th school year as the Director of Prevention and Intervention Counseling with APS. She has 25 years of combined clinical and school counseling experience in various settings. That includes community mental health agencies, her own private practice specializing in children and teens, and working in both public and charter schools at all levels. One of her specialized counseling programs at APS is Crossroads. I know she's especially proud of this. A team of 15 master's level licensed school counselors specially trained in substance misuse prevention and intervention at each of APS's 13 traditional high schools, with the additional 2 currently supporting the middle schools. During her time at APS, she has partnered with APS Nursing to pioneer PORT, the post-overdose reentry team, and this is one of those cutting-edge programs. It ensures a supportive school return after a medical event in which a known or suspected overdose has occurred on the campus. We thank you very much for being here. You're the only one with fans, apparently. We also have Heather Jarrell, who is a medical doctor, chief medical examiner of the Office of the Medical Investigator for the state of New Mexico. Dr. Jarrell has a bachelor's degree in biology from Valdosta State University in Valdosta, Georgia, followed by a medical degree from Mercer University School of Medicine, that's in Macon, Georgia, where she graduated in 2008. She completed her residency in anatomic pathology from the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia. She is board certified in anatomic pathology, neuropathology, and forensic pathology. Dr. Jarrell began her career at the Office of the Medical Investigator back in 2014, and she was appointed Chief Medical Examiner in January of 2021. She was appointed permanently to that position then, and she is a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the National Association of Medical Examiners, and the American Association of Neuropathologists. Dr. Jarrell, thanks for being here. And finally on our panel, we have Gabe DeBaltz, a paramedic EMS education coordinator. He's been a paramedic for 17 years. That's combined between Albuquerque Ambulance Service and Bernalillo County Fire Rescue. For the last 10 years, Mr. DeBaltz has been the Emergency Medical Services Education Coordinator, overseeing all EMS education for BCFR and part-time faculty for CNM's EMS education program, so heavily involved in those education efforts. In 2020, he was asked to provide medical education for the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office and has worked side by side with their advanced training program to provide all medical treatment education. Mr. DeBaltz, thanks for being here. So I'd like to first start with Chief Funes, and I'd also like to ask our panelists, if you would, if you hear something that's being talked about by one of our other panelists, feel free to jump in. If it strikes a thought or makes you think of something you think the audience here would like to hear about or knows about, maybe an anecdote that proves what's being talked about, we'd love to hear it. So I'd love to turn this more into a discussion than an interrogation. So if you would, don't be shy about chiming in, if you would. Chief Funes, the question is, what role does the community involvement play in addressing the fentanyl crisis right now? And how can people here in this room support law enforcement in this fight?
While community involvement is crucial to fighting fentanyl, I believe that the community could help by staying alert and reporting all suspicious activity to law enforcement that helps us with our investigations. I think it's also important that the community would maybe enroll in education for fentanyl or addiction, and by spreading awareness and supporting harm reduction, such as needle exchange programs or naloxone distribution, the community could help to save lives and get people in contact with the support that they need.
Can everyone hear all right? Was that answer clear? You heard in the back okay? A little, okay, bring the mic maybe a little closer for the next question here. We're going to go to Commander Hartsock. And Commander, this is a broad question. How has the surge in fentanyl-related overdoses influenced your department's response strategies, especially, of course, with regard to prevention, emergency response, and community outreach?
Well, one of the best things our department has done is honestly partner up with this group, Keep New Mexico Alive, and help support it with strategies that get to the broader parts of the community. Messages from police can often come off as just, maybe menacing or threatening, because our resolution is jail most of the times. So partnering up with Bernalillo County and the state and fire resources and ACS has been a really good strategy for us. We also try to educate schools and parents on the surge of social media and its use to traffic the drug. We see open drug markets essentially existing online that if they existed in the physical world, we wouldn't tolerate it. But in Facebook groups and Telegram groups, persons are able just to go in there and click and buy. Although a lot of those can turn deadly when they turn into robberies or something else. But having a strong community message, using police as a last resort for drug addicts is our preference. And educating really parents and the trusted people around addicts to try to help and support that person as much as they can to get out of that cycle so they never have to interact with us at all.
Commander, thank you. I'd like to turn now to Special Agent in Charge Thorne James. The DEA has said that the drug traffickers are using cell phones and social media platforms to sell their drugs, as Commander Hartsock was talking about here. Can you tell us more specifically how they're targeting young people in your experience?
Oh, absolutely. So I want to just first start off by saying that DEA has 3 arms of how we investigate, and that's going to be our enforcement arm, which everyone is familiar with, and then there's our diversion and regulatory, and then we have our community outreach arm, and I like to say that our intelligence division undergirds all of that. And so what we see from intelligence as well as every arm is that the cartels are targeting youth, and they do that by selling and pushing their poison and fentanyl on apps like Snapchats, Twitter, Facebook, and I'm not picking on any particular app, but they all have access to drug dealers that are selling across these different platforms. And so they make it very attractive to our youth. They make it very easy by you don't have to go out and look for drug dealers. You can sit at home, go online, go on some of these apps and order your drugs and have them delivered right to your door.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chief Jaramillo, this is another broad question. If you could tell us what Albuquerque Fire Rescue is doing and who you are working with to address the opioid epidemic here in the metro.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a few programs. One of them we implemented a while back, which is our Leave Behind Narcan program. our firefighters carry Narcan, and when we reverse an overdose, we're able to leave behind a kit for the family. That way, if they need it subsequent to that 911 call, they have the resource available to them. And we've partnered with Albuquerque Community Safety, the third branch of public safety in the city of Albuquerque, to do follow-up with those patients. Once we've cleared that scene, they're able to go back and do follow-up to see if they need additional resources. So we've had that program for a while, and we're really excited about a new program that we just rolled out on October 15th, so 2 days ago. But it was a long time coming. Our medical director, Dr. Kimberly Pruitt, had this idea to somehow, I know we talk a lot about meeting people where they're at, and first responders, when we reverse an overdose, that usually means that person was very near death. And so we know that a lot of times overdoses are reversed now with Narcan in the community where 911 isn't even called. So when we reverse an overdose, we know that individual was very near death, and we want to offer them an opportunity. We're calling it the golden opportunity, which is kind of coined after other cities that do this. But we have a lot of partners. We really started out strong with the New Mexico Department of Health and with Duke City Recovery Toolbox, and we had a lot of other partners jump on board. But what we're doing is our firefighters, our paramedics, were able to obtain a special skill to administer Suboxone in the field. And so when we reverse an overdose, we can offer the individual that overdosed an opportunity to be in this program, and we can give them Suboxone on scene. We truly believe that medication-assisted treatment is really what is going to save lives. And we can give them Suboxone on scene so that they don't have to experience withdrawals. And we can then transport them from where they're at to a service provider that has agreed to save beds for these clients that we're servicing. So like I said, we rolled it out 2 days ago. We have a lot of partners that I do want to mention because this is something that obviously as a fire department, we can't do on our own. So for the 911 system, we're partnering with Bernalillo County Fire and Albuquerque Ambulance. Albuquerque Ambulance and ACS and CARES Campus are helping us provide transport to the service providers. And then right now, the 4 service providers that we have on board are Duke City Recovery Toolbox, who is our OG service provider that jumped on board right away, Casa de Salud, Courageous Transformations, and CARES Campus. We're really excited. We have had 2 patients, one that we thought exactly met the criteria and decided to walk away from the scene. But we know if we continue to engage with this individual that hopefully we can get the individuals, after they get comfortable, maybe we'll join in and decide to take the leap and take their golden opportunity to get to one of these providers. So we're really excited to be able, maybe next year at the symposium, to be able to report back some of the success stories that we have with this program. But we feel like Narcan is it's very reactive, and it's it's a life-saving tool, but we're also trying to get people into recovery so that we don't have to keep re-engaging with them in the 911 system.
Chief, thank you very much. It's really nice to hear a story about where police or fire rescue are interacting with people and the way those relationships continue to evolve and get better and better in terms of trying to solve this problem. So we thank you. Also, a thank you to Albuquerque Community Safety, who you mentioned, who we have some folks helping out here today. I know you're a big part of this battle. Now turning to Ms. Schroeder, we had a story in the news within the last year where the governor was ordering wastewater testing for drugs, including fentanyl, at some APS schools last fall. Ms. Schroeder, can you talk about that program and tell us what APS has done since then in response to the results?
Sure. So it's really interesting to me because usually when a story like that breaks, everyone scrambles and what are we going to do and how are we going to handle this? Well, it was really cool. And this sounds odd for me to say, but it was really cool because we didn't have to scramble. We have Crossroads in place. I cannot talk enough about our program. We have the only school district in the country that has school counselors with special training in each of our 13 high schools and now moving into middle school because we know we need to get started earlier working with our kids. But it is daunting, and we are trying the best that we can with what we have. But the wastewater results were no big surprise, I don't think, to any of us, especially because we already know what's going on in our schools. I did want to make a comment really quick about social media and the phones. So this year, a couple of our schools have started implementing the no phone policy, and we have seen a decrease in infractions on campus where kids are caught vaping in the bathrooms or whatever, directly connected to them not having their phones. So that is a very valid, it's a connection and it's there for sure. But one other thing I wanted to mention instead of just bragging on my programs, which I will do all day, and you guys will have to pull the microphone away from me. The other thing that came out of that whole wastewater thing was that we sat back and we realized, you know what, this is not an APS issue. Even though it was our wastewater that was tested, students are not the only ones in the school. It is not an APS issue, it is a community issue. And out of that, we're like, well, what can we do? We've heard there needs to be more education. We need to work with families of our kids, that are using. We need to get just more education out there. So it was really amazing that we reached out to partners. So much of what we can do and change that we can do comes from collaboration, comes with partnerships. And out of that, last year, I don't know if any of you attended Spree, which was last spring. That was a work of love out of a shared vision of extending into the community and raising awareness of what is going on with substances, but also connecting people to resources. I don't know, here we've got 35 tables of resources in our community. That is amazing. And we had that at Spree. And this was a result of this collaboration between the city, the county, the DEA, and also the Department of Health and APS. That's what we need to do. We need to work together to be able to get anywhere in trying to, whether it's fentanyl or just any substances that are out there. It's a part of it, and our culture has changed. We have legalization. It's changed, and we need to know how to talk to our families who might use, and we need to be able to do that. In my program, we use harm reduction, no judgment. We just want to help your kids. We just want to be involved in your life. We want to be a resource for you. So it is, but it's that collaborative piece that makes a difference. And I will stop talking because I will keep going.
Ms. Schroeder, thank you. That was great. Turning now to Dr. Jarrell from OMI. Doctor, maybe you can give us some broader perspective on the crisis, maybe by stepping back and looking at some of the numbers. Can you tell us what the trends are for overdose deaths in New Mexico for the past 3 years? Did that, in fact, decrease those fentanyl deaths last year? And are there any fentanyl death trends that you'd like to talk about in youth?
So first of all, I want to say that I do have the numbers, realizing that every single one of these people is not just a number and that they're loved ones of many of you. So I'll start off with that. In 2020, and I'm going to say that the numbers that the OMI has are deaths that we've investigated. The Department of Health probably has more inclusive data. We don't have jurisdiction of deaths that occur in our sovereign nation, so we won't have those deaths unless we were consulted. So in 2020, there were 305 people who died from fentanyl overdoses. That number nearly doubled in 2021 to 589, 633 in 2022, 644 in 2023. What we have thus far as of October 1st, now realizing that there's going to be some lag period from the time a person dies and the time that we can issue a final cause of death. Usually we're looking about 2 to 3 months because we have to wait on toxicology to come back and other things and other circumstances. But as of October 1st, for deaths that we've certified with fentanyl being in that cause, is 294. So we are seeing a reduction somewhat this year. The age numbers that we see, or the ages that we see, is ages 25 to 34 is the highest age group. Coming in slowly behind that is age 35 to, is ages, excuse me, age 25 to 34, and then age 35 to 44. And one thing that I noticed in the past couple years, which was alarming, was that in 2022, between the ages of 1 and 4, we had 2 deaths that were caused by fentanyl. In 2023, we had 3 deaths caused by fentanyl. And that seems to have reduced this year so far to 1 death. That's concerning because you have little ones crawling around, presumably getting into things, as we all know that kids do. And so that's something that had my attention for a while and is concerning. And so it looks to be that it has tapered off. And so I'll leave it there.
Dr. Joe, thank you. We're coming up on our last question for this round, so I'd like to, if we could, maybe get a microphone to whoever wants to ask a question next. And in the meantime, we'll talk to Mr. DeBaltz, the paramedic and emergency medical expert with us. Mr. DeBaltz, can you tell us, well, first of all, I also want to mention, for those who haven't noticed, that Nella Domenici is here with us. I just want to acknowledge the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate in the upcoming election. Mr. DeBaltz, the question to you. You can applaud. We can do that. Can you tell us about Bernalillo County Fire Rescue and what you are doing to mitigate this opioid crisis?
Yeah, first I'd like to tell you guys that the fire department does the bulk of the work, but it would be untrue. We decided to partner up with the sheriff's department, and in their particular case, because of the way that they are dispatched and their response model, they are often on scene first by several minutes for any emergency, specifically in anything where there's questionable life status. And because of that, we actually had to retrospectively look at the way that we were calculating the amount of opioid reversals that we were doing. And to be honest with you guys, I was 100% convinced that we were not experiencing the opioid crisis that a lot of folks know to be true. And when we started working with the sheriff's department and then understood that they were actually being tasked with some of those survival, we'll just say, skills, we knew that we had an opportunity to create even more safe. So we spent a significant amount of time teaching all of them CPR. Every one of their marked units has a AED on board. And then I spent an extraordinary amount of time with them discussing the opioid response model, the appropriate evidence-based medicine for them to do the reversal, and then how to better team up with both the fire and our behavioral health clinicians so that we can get people to less fear of fire and EMS, or specifically the deputies, and do our best to navigate them into a treatment program.
Mr. DeBaltz, thank you. Now we'll take a question, if we could, and I guess we can open this up, and whoever feels most competent to answer would be great. Please.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually have a specific question. I was at the historical perspective on synthetic drug trafficking earlier from Tawanda, so the question is for you. Throughout its existence, the DEA has focused on dismantling various cartels, Sinaloa now, but before it was the Medellin, it was Jalisco, it was Juarez. And despite these efforts, cartels continue to pop up, and so begins the cycle again. It's a two-part question. Given this historical pattern, how does the DEA evaluate its long-term success in this strategy, given its cyclical nature? And is there any recognition within the agency that this strategy hasn't addressed the root causes of drug consumption and distribution, especially when compared to successful evidence-based strategies like safe supply lines, safe consumption sites, and harm reduction?
No.
That's an easy one.
Yeah, the answer is no. I do think that the DEA has been very successful in reducing the amount of not just fentanyl, but every drug from the streets, not only in New Mexico, but across the country. Our priority right now is both the CJNG and Sinaloa cartels. We will continue to combat the cartels. 95% of the fentanyl that comes into this country comes through the southwest border. We know that it is CJNG and Sinaloa primarily that are responsible for this, and we will continue to prioritize the cartels. The question you asked earlier, how are they targeting our youth? You see things like rainbow fentanyl that is specifically crafted by the cartels to target young people. So we think that that is extremely egregious, and we will not stop. We will continue to make strides, and we won't stop until there are no more cartels.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn back now to Deputy Chief Funes, but if we can line up another question from the audience in the meantime, that would be great. Chief, can you describe the impact of fentanyl on our community in terms of crime rates, overdoses, public safety concerns, and share with our audience what measures, in your experience, law enforcement agencies are taking now to combat this crisis?
Sorry, can you hear me this time? My apologies. Fentanyl has had a devastating impact on our community, obviously. And not only does it strain or put a strain, not only does overdose deaths put a strain on our emergency services, but it also deeply affects the families in our community. In terms of crime, the presence of fentanyl has led to an increase in drug-related offenses, such as trafficking, possession, and crimes to support addiction.
We were also asking about the different measures that you're taking. It feels like this epidemic has forced every law enforcement agency to do things differently and to think about things differently.
Right. Public safety is a major concern, as fentanyl is often mixed with other drugs, leading to accidental overdose, even among those who may not know that they're ingesting it. Our agency, to combat this crisis, has implemented several initiatives. We have specialized units focused on drug enforcement. We collaborate closely with other local and federal law enforcement agencies in order to share intelligence and resources that really helps in our area.
Chief, thank you. Thank you very much. Did we have another question from the audience? There in the back, please.
Yes, hi. My name is Delfino. I work at Casa de Salud. I'm one of the program managers there for all the case management and all that. Thank you guys all for what you guys do and what you continue to do and what's going to come out ahead. So thank you guys. And remember, I want you guys to know I'm on your guys' side, all right? So just because I'm going to ask you guys this question, don't get upset. We know you guys have procedures when the emergency and rescue comes out or paramedics. We know that. But do you guys respond to every overdose the same if it was with overdose of fentanyl or overdose with just somebody who took the medication wrong at home? And that being said is this, that we had an overdose about 2 weeks ago, and we called it in. The guy was in his vehicle. He was overdosing in his vehicle. By the time the paramedics and the sheriffs came out, we already had him by our front door. His vehicle was way over there. They didn't want to let the paramedics come in or anybody until they cleared the vehicle that's way over there, and the patient's over here on the other side, like over 70 feet away from the vehicle. So my thing was that we want to work with the paramedics. We want to work with the police department. We want to work with everybody, but When that stuff happens, our own clients don't want to call the paramedics, don't want to call the sheriffs, don't want to call the cops because they come in gun ho first. And that scares a lot of our people. And I'm talking about us because I am from that. I've been out already 20 years from prison. And that right there will keep us from calling for help or reaching out for help. So we just want to know the procedures. I know that you guys have to get that clearance, but that scares a lot of our folks.
Yeah, I'll start from APD and just want to first say, let's go Dodgers, and let's go up 3-1 on the Mets. I like that Kershaw jersey. Bregman's not here, so screw the Astros. But from the police side, I'll respond first, and I'll let our fire chief respond. You know, it's not necessarily a policy that departments have on how to respond to overdoses because they can all be so unique. And we really trust the officers. We give training on safety and how to deal with people experiencing overdoses or just high, but also their experience in that every environment is different. And that the only reason police are generally called is for the safety of the fire and rescue personnel. That is primarily what their responsibility is, so that a paramedic can come in and feel safe and secure so they can work on the patient. And in my experience, when I was doing it on patrol and when I've been on these calls, that is primarily what the officers and the deputies are trying to do. In that specific case, you know, I don't know, right? I'm not there. I don't know what the total environment was or why an officer or a deputy wanted to check a car beforehand, but they did. Doesn't mean it was right or wrong, but we do try to trust the officers and deputies to make these kind of real-world decisions and do it right now because there's an ambulance and a fire truck waiting around the corner. And they won't show up until we say clear for 43, right, which is the 10 code for rescue. So they're waiting for that call. So we are generally trying to just communicate with everyone on scene. We got to make sure it's safe. We got to make sure it's secure. Once we do that, they get to come in and do their work. But I'll let fire respond as well.
I'm not going to say go Dodgers. Sorry. I will speak a little bit. Casa de Salud, we love the work that you're doing, by the way. It's an amazing, amazing place. It's in county, so county fire is who responds out to you all. But I do want to just touch on an aspect of your question. Do we respond the same if it's somebody that took prescription medication or somebody that overdosed, you know, on, name it, wherever. We respond the same. AFR responds and county fire responds the same, regardless of like where, when, what was taken. It comes in as an overdose. It's triaged. A lot of these calls do have a standby for law enforcement to clear. That's just a procedural thing, but it doesn't change based on if you're overdosing on prescription pills in a wealthy neighborhood versus anywhere else. When we respond out. But your organization is in county, so I do want to give Gabe the opportunity to answer.
So not knowing the particulars of your particular call, I will tell you one of the biggest things that we did in the county organizations was to get the two sister departments to basically start communicating. And at this point, our standard response is that because the sheriff's department is going to often be the first units on scene, we specifically work with them to make sure that they recognize the opioid symptoms for overdose, and they are equipped with the correct medication for that. Outside of that, there's a lot of things that even on the fire side for EMS, we don't have those medications that would counteract a lot of the other drugs that somebody could be under. In those cases, we're very much asking the sheriff's deputies to show up and administer the correct treatment and then give us the information so that we are abreast of what's happening so that we can make a better response when we do show up if somebody requires an elevated level of medical care, or we're able to tend to them until they can make a decision on their own medical care.
Mr. DeBoss, thank you very much. Did we have someone else who wanted to talk to this? Speak to this? No? Okay.
Hello.
And if you've got more tough questions, if you've got more tough questions in the back, we'll find a place for you at Channel 13. Yeah, all right.
Hi, my name is Kristen. I am with New Mexico Harm Reduction Collaborative. I also do work with UNM. Earlier, we had a panel and a lot of heartfelt talk about being a parent of kids who've been in opiate addiction. I have two, one who did some time in prison and one who I actually opened a harm reduction with. And it took me a long road to get there. One of the biggest things I can tell you from coming from 2008 to now is all the differences we've made in trying to combat heroin, opioids, all those things. And then I came to a conclusion recently doing this work, which is we have these specific names like Heroin Awareness Committee and Fentanyl Awareness, but we don't look at the mental health as to why those things are a reason. I guess my question is, when we're trying to destigmatize all these things, I hear a lot of things still being thrown around like drug addicts and the addicts and the fentanyl, and not specifically the situation. Day to day at our harm reduction, we've actually dealt with APD walking up to people who are trying to get supplies and trying to cite them at the moment. I don't see how that's destigmatizing anything. And I think the question I have is, how can we do better? Because I would like to see that. And then I love the Crossroads program, but I really do believe that we need to let kids have Narcan in school. Just an FYI, I'm hoping more is done because I was able to give some kids at a homecoming Narcan that got taken away from them.
We're working on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
100%.
That's pretty much my soapbox on it.
Thanks for the comment. And just want to say, APD wants to work with all of our community partners. And if there are spaces where there's facilities that are having people come for treatment, that's something that you reach out to anyone you know. You can stop me after this, but an area commander, a lot of times it might just be an education issue going on where the officers aren't really clear what that building is. When I worked for the sheriff's department, there was a methadone clinic off of Bridge and Atrisco my entire career. And it was considered, chicken shit to go over there and try to get someone walking by and pat down and find a drug on them, right? But we all knew it. We knew what that facility was, and so there might be an education component that just needs to be elevated. That's not necessarily a plan that we have to try to combat this.
Commander, thank you. Do we have another question on deck right now? We do. Please.
Hi, so this is more of a law enforcement question, but I see a lot of folks who get released from MDC and they come out with a possession charge and like kind of something else on top of it, whether it's a breaking and entering, something like that. My question is, like, even if you don't have the numbers, do you see a sort of a blooming of those type of charges, like an increase of those things? And is that something your officers are looking for when you encounter people who are getting arrested for these type of charges?
So I can tell you, and I'll let Chief Funes answer too, property crimes are hugely driven by drug addictions in this community. And last year I was over our burglary team and our organized retail theft team, which looked at shoplifting in Albuquerque. And when you look at the ground level players who are actually doing the breaking into the stores or they're doing the shoplifting, it's rare that you're not going to find someone that is really struggling with a terrible addiction. Fentanyl is common, but that's not the only thing. Now, they're usually doing this to fence the property off to someone else who may or may not be in a drug addiction, but they are using high-risk, high-need individuals to go commit a lot of these property crimes. So when you see those accompanying charges, it's honestly not surprising from our standpoint.
So I would say the same, that a lot of those types of crimes are committed to support addiction. And we do have programs that we could use through Care Campus. We have the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program. I don't know if you've heard of that, but if someone is caught committing a crime where there's not a major crime, but if it's a larceny and somebody's stealing to support their habit, we have the option to divert them into treatment instead of incarceration. So those are some of the things that we are doing for those types of crimes.
Chief Funes, thank you. Do we have another question?
Thank you. I just to sort of follow up, but thank you so much for your question. Also to say I have a nephew I love and helped raise. It's a firefighter. I have 3 cousins that are law enforcement, so all respect for the field. I know and I hear from my nephew all the time that sometimes it's hard, right? And people get burned out seeing some of the hardest, I wouldn't say some of the hardest things our communities are going through up front, in your face, day after day, time after time, and that can get wearing. So my question is twofold to both address, but we're seeing that sometimes that might impact people's bias or the stigma that they see when they are reacting to folks in those hardest of times after seeing it many times or seeing the tragedies or the impacts on the families. So what kind of training do law enforcement first responders need for your own self-care? What can I do to advocate for things that are going to help our first responders to have some of that care, healing, de-escalation from the things you have to see every day? And how can we also make that into training that helps? Because I've heard from a lot of the families, right, that totally respect law enforcement, that when their loved one passed, they didn't receive the best kind of message from those first responders. And so I just want to hear, what can we do to help improve that situation, whether it be for training or care for first responders, the whole realm of things? What's your ideas, please?
I'll start. I think some of the burnout and the frustration that you're speaking of, when we talk about, when we see an application from a firefighter that wants to join the department, 99% of the time they say because they want to help people. And I think a lot of the frustrations that turn into burnout, that may turn into not having a compassion fatigue or not displaying empathy, comes from frustrations with the system and not necessarily the individuals. It seems as first responders, a lot of times we sometimes have to engage with people in the same circumstances, that we have nowhere to take them, or there's not enough places to take them. We have to take them to emergency rooms, and that's not the right place for somebody. That's not the care that they need. And we have all these great organizations like Care Campus, like Casa de Salud, like all of these places, but there's just not enough capacity for them. And so people get stuck in this loop of first responders, whether it be police, fire, emergency rooms. It's not definitive care for what they need. Somebody who's overdosed they might need emergency care because they might need stabilization, but they need a lot more than that. And a lot of times they don't receive it, and then they're right back out. They still have their bracelets on their wrist, and we respond to them in the same day, the next day. So I think that's the best way to help support first responders, is to help keep working on the systems of care that these individuals that are suffering from addiction and from mental health crisis need, because we don't have enough of that. And the second part is, I know all of our agencies have really worked to step up our care for our personnel. We, specifically in our department, we hired a licensed clinical social worker that oversees our behavioral health program for our firefighters. She starts with them when they're cadets. We are going to start following them through the career with them. And we've tried to implement a lot of strategies to help with that self-care for our firefighters.
Chief, thank you very much. Do we have another question from the audience right now? Please.
Thank you. Thank you all for everything you do. I know you're helping our country with probably its biggest crisis, its biggest epidemic. My question is for Kylie, I think, did I pronounce that right? New Mexico actually has a very strong balance sheet right now. We have a lot of money that we've gotten from the oil and gas industry. And when I hear you talk about, it is wonderful that all 13 of our high schools have a certain level of focus on this area, but I'm wondering, given that you're so immersed in the area, how do you think about the amount of psychologists and social workers we have for mental wellness, mental health, in both our middle schools and our high schools? And then what do you think about the ability to really truly educate our middle school students and our high school students on the pragmatic side of this phenomena? Do you think we're doing a good job? Could it be a lot better? And what's holding us back from doing an A+ job in both areas, mental wellness, which would prevent some of the problems, and then education on really the addiction issues.
Holy cow, that was quite a question. I'll try to, okay, so let me think of where to go first on that. So one of our largest struggles is always funding, always funding. Even though I'm very proud of Crossroads and the fact that we do have the 13 in each of our high schools, we have so many middle schools, and we have 2 Crossroads counselors right now that are trying to do a mixture of prevention and intervention, and we're just overwhelmed. We know we need to get into elementary schools to do prevention, but we don't have the capacity. We don't have the amount of counselors that we need. In our schools, we need more mental health involvement. School counselors are able to help students to a certain amount, but as far as therapists, as far as getting therapy, more mental health, we need, it all comes down to funding. And we're looking at, so at APS, we also, I have 2 other programs. One of them is that we contract with community providers to come into the school during the school day to offer therapy to students. That's one of my other programs. The other one is, they're called behavioral health therapists, and they're actually APS employees. But it is not an operational position. It is funded when schools literally scrape together grant money, whatever they can find, and say, okay, instead of funding a half-time librarian, we're going to fund this behavioral health therapist. And that's what they're forced to do. They're forced to make a decision between something that may benefit the students academically and something that could benefit them mental health-wise. Our feeling, I'm biased as a counselor, right? Because I'm like, how can we do better in school if our kids can't even get up in the morning and don't want to go to school, or have issues that they can't get past? How are we going to succeed? How are we going to improve our graduation rate if we can't help our children's mental health? That's my bias.
Thank you.
So it always comes back to, how do we get more therapists? We have another issue, which is we have a shortage in the area. So even in my programs that I do have, we don't have enough therapists that want to come to the schools. We don't have enough, so we can always do better. We need more for our kids. The mental health situation for our students is dire. After coming back after COVID, we're seeing deficits in our kids in all areas. And how do we do that? You know, how in the schools, how do we do that? And we need more supports. We need more. And I think all of us in our areas, it's so frustrating because we do have people who want to help, and we just lack the capacity to be able to do what we want to do. So now I've forgotten the rest of your question, and that was really.
You answered it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. I will add that Albuquerque Public Schools is a New Mexico leader in substance misuse prevention. They have implemented DEA's Operation Prevention curriculum, and that's in partnership with Discovery Education. And it is a science-based, evidence-informed curriculum that is free. It can be catered to any school curriculum or program, and it's something that can inform not only students, but educators and parents as well. So I would encourage you to, if you're not familiar, to go onto our website and look at that curriculum. Sure.
Sorry, I know. So I am so sorry to my DEA partners that I did not mention that. I do want to say that often when we think of the DEA, it comes into the, how we imagine the agents and whatever. And I think all of us almost have a stigma against the DEA at times. And I would like to say that from my point of view, in working with them, there's a whole branch of the DEA that I didn't even know was there, which is this prevention piece, which I think is amazing. And they have an outreach position in Michelle that works with us and with our state, and the curriculum. It's not even just the curriculum that they provide, which is amazing. It's timely, it's up to date, it's not stale, showing people from the 80s talking about drugs. It's amazing, and I'm very thankful because they don't just provide information, it's support. It's ongoing support and partnership, and that is amazing. So I wanted to add that on, and I'm so sorry that you had to say that instead of me.
Thank you, and that's one of the reasons why I always like to start with the arms of DEA, because everybody is more familiar with our enforcement and diversion and regulatory and less familiar with our community outreach arm, so.
I just want to add something, and Lisa, was the panel before us the lived experience panel? A youth panel. There was a group of APS teachers in the back, and they asked a question. It was such a good question. They're like, "We're a bunch of middle school teachers. Where could we have done better hypothetically when you were this age?" And the first answer, he nailed it. He said, "Nothing. This was at my home. This was the people around me most of the day. It was not the 7.5 hours at school that probably would have made a difference here. It was the other 100+ hours of the week." And we went to Rio Grande High School, so we joke around a lot about it, but that school gets kind of crapped on a lot for this and that, but some of the smartest people I've met to this day went to that school and went to Stanford and work at NASA right now, and a bunch of them work in their community. And the school had honestly very little to do with it. It was an important part of it, but it was really, if you look at the families of those kids, really allowed them to be successful. And so a lot of these programs are excellent, and they got to keep going. But the young childhood experiences before the age of 4, things like that are really, really important in our human trafficking victims, our drug addicts, and our violent juvenile shooters that eventually emerge. A lot of them have really similar backgrounds, broken households that lead to a lot of this. By the time they meet me, it's way too late. Like, my chance for intervention is really tough. You're very, very bad off if police are now getting involved. You've likely been on this substance for some time before I get alerted to it, or Emily or anyone else up here's crews. So just wanted to point that out. The school stuff is great, but it's the at-home stuff too, and that prior panel really, really nailed that.
And by the way, I work for a Rio Grande grad, so.
We're everywhere.
Yeah, I know. As a Highland grad, it's troubling.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think maybe we have time for one more question. Is that possible? Yes, the answer is yes.
Go ahead.
Please.
Greetings. I'm Wayne Lindstrom, the Deputy County Manager for Behavioral Health for Bernalillo County. And since 2022, it's been the intention of the Federal Communication Commission, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the U.S. Congress, the New Mexico Healthcare Authority, to stand up a behavioral health crisis response system on par with the 911 emergency management system. And we have some movements in that direction. We do have a 988 statewide crisis call center hub that does text and chat, and text and chat's absolutely essential if you're going to have an access point for young people. But the intention of this parallel system, if you will, is to be a major diversion from law enforcement, from detention, from emergency department utilization, et cetera. I think Bernalillo County and the city have made significant strides with regards to co-responder teams and ACS. We recently had the ribbon cutting for the new Crisis Triage Center at UNMH. And those are all steps in the right direction. But I'd be interested in hearing from you, what do we need to do next to move the needle so that there's greater collaboration between our 911 dispatch centers and 988, adoption of interoperability standards, standing up civilian mobile crisis teams that are dispatched by 988 and not by 911, and whereby they can have transfer protocols when appropriate between those respective call center dispatch resources, et cetera. So that's in essence my question. Thank you.
I'll touch on a part of that. I think we love expanding out on co-response. It's so great having trained providers that have more training with mental health, how to help with in crisis than what first responders have. We all have baseline training and we have years of experience doing it, but it's been great having that co-response model. I love all the effort that's going into the first response piece of it, but I think that what we're lacking and where we need the help is where we take people. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we keep focusing on that initial response, and then we are doing it better. And as we're adding those resources, we keep doing it better. But then we don't have definitive care that we can take people to get them out of that loop. So as we work on how we integrate 988, which has been a great resource that we've been able to integrate in our systems in the city, and we're trying to expand that out. We need more just as much attention on bringing more providers in that can take our clients when we transport them, whether that be from law enforcement, from fire, from ambulances, or just people trying to find a place to get help. Like, there's just not enough of that. So I think that's my piece to the question. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that. Yep. Great point. She mentioned it's worse for youth, and that's absolutely accurate. There's some really great resources that we've, Serenity Mesa, that we've learned about doing a lot of our work on with their golden opportunity, but there are absolutely not enough resources for youth. I think we lean a lot into the schools, and then the schools don't have the resources. And so when we talk about where we can help youth get resources, there's just not a lot of places that we can take them. We've really learned that as we've been trying to expand out, where can we take people that's not an ER? If they're under the age of 18, there's not a whole lot of those places.
Chief, thank you very much. I think we're out of time. I would like to thank so much the audience, everyone here, for being here today. Wonderful questions, wonderful discussion, some wonderfully pointed questions as well. Of course, I want to thank these panelists. We have decades and decades and decades of public service sitting in front of you, and these are the people fighting every day to solve this crisis in our community. So we thank them so much. And hopefully after this, the DEA and APS can work things out. So we're hopeful about things. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm way shorter than him. Thank you so much, Dean Staley, KRQE News 13 anchor. Okay, we're going to do a quick change out, and I love hearing this piece because and what our chief was just telling us, our next panel is our provider panel. So those questions about how do we create an ecosystem, a continuum of care that works for our families? What's the need? What are providers seeing? We need you to be in the room again in just a few minutes as we switch out the panel. So we have about 5 minutes, and we'll start the next provider panel that's going to have all these providers that I've gained so much respect for: Dr. Daniel Duhigg, Dr. John Kavanaugh, Dr. Laura Rivka Stern, Dr. Anjali Taneja, and Dr. Brandon Warwick. We're so excited to have the provider panel up next. Get a quick drink and come right back. I told you we were going to be quick. So let's start getting back in because I know this is going to be a juicy, meaty, tofu-y full panel. Never want to offend the vegetarians. So if we can get folks settled back in your seats, I know the connections we make here are so important. So thank you for connecting, sharing cards, sharing numbers, emails. Let's stay connected because that's how we do the work here. We've learned before that that's what solves our problems, right? More connections, more services, more collaborations. So we have our last panel for today, and I'm so excited. Many of the questions on the previous panel were asking questions about providers. So ta-da, we have a whole panel full of such strong heart-led people who care, who do a lot of this work outside volunteer time, outside of their regular practice, in addition to their regular practice, and they're giving of their hearts, time, and love for our communities. So I'm excited for this, and I'm super excited to have Shelly Rirondo from KOAT 7 Action 7 News as our moderator for this panel. So please give a big round welcome to Shelly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having me back here again. I was here last year at the event that took place down at the convention center, and it was just amazing, all the people I met and all the experts here that share their time. It really is a special event, so glad to be here today. We're going to start with some questions, and as we go along, what we'll do is if anyone thinks of something they want to ask in the moment, just make your way up. We have 2 people, I'm told, on each end with a microphone. There's microphone man 1, and I think there's someone over here. Oh, microphone man 2, hi. So just make your way to the front. They'll give you the microphone. So again, as we go along, if anything comes to mind, just jump right in, and then we'll also have questions at the end too. All right, let's start first with, this question goes to Dr. Stern. Is addiction a chronic disease that's actually treatable? Oh, is it?
The answer to that question is yes. Addiction is a chronic disease, and yes, it is treatable. So I want to start by reading you the definition for addiction from the American Society for Addiction Medicine. Addiction is a treatable, chronic, medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experience. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. Prevention efforts and treatment approaches for addiction are generally as successful as those for other chronic diseases. So that's one of the, when I talk to people about addiction as a chronic disease, I talk about it like other chronic diseases. Nobody wants to have diabetes or hypertension, okay? Nobody wants to have those diseases, but once they have them, there are many different forms to getting that disease under control. And generally, when you have a disease like diabetes, it's a lifelong disease. Some people can control it with diet and exercise. Lots of people need medication to control their disease. What is important is getting the disease under control. So the same is true for addiction. Nobody wants to be an addict. Nobody thought that the first time that they tried something, whether it was alcohol or marijuana or whatever other substance, you know, pain pills, some of which have been prescribed by physicians to treat something legitimate, that they were going to become an addict. That's not anybody's intention. However, once that happens, for whatever reason, that they become physically dependent on it and emotionally dependent on it, and have seen the consequences of how it's affected their life, there are treatments. And that's what's important, is getting the disease under control so that it is not affecting their lives and the lives of the people around them. People with addiction, there are many, many, many people with the disease of addiction who are fully participating in life, are active, have families, have jobs, and are in your community, and they're a part of us. Again, addiction does not discriminate. It can happen to anyone. So we'll talk more about stigma, because that's a big part of changing it from, you know, a sense that these are people with a moral failing to they have a chronic disease with treatment and support, and many times medications, the disease can be controlled.
All right, thank you so much. I want to mention that Dr. Stern is the medical director for Gateway West. Moving on to our next question with Dr. Duhigg, who is the medical director at Duke City Recovery Toolbox. The question is, there's a perception that taking medications for opioid use disorder replaces one addiction for another. So what are the challenges with that?
That's a great question. Thank you. And I think this is a question that a lot of us struggle with. Certainly a lot of the people that we serve, the patients, and a lot of us in healthcare as well. And what I like to do is go back to, so we have this definition of an addiction from the American Society of Medicine, or of addiction medicine. But then we also have the diagnostic criteria, right? What the DSM kind of says, how to diagnose a substance use disorder or an addiction. And really what that talks about is where someone's relationship, much like what was said here, someone's relationship to a substance gets in the way of functioning, or gets in the way of their relationships, or gets in the way of safety, right? This is what addiction is. And if we contrast that with a medicine to treat addiction, and what we see with medicines like Suboxone, like methadone, like naltrexone, and some of the others, is that by taking this medicine and doing the other parts of the treatment, the counseling, taking care of people's mental health, taking care of our physical health, that now we're able to heal relationships with other people, and we're able to function more, keep jobs, maintain our roles in our family and in our community. And so by taking a medicine, if it's removing all of those things that we say are addiction, then it's not replacing one addiction with another, right? It's really replacing an addiction with treatment, or treating addiction. Now, I think most of us would say, well, that doesn't mean that the addiction just goes away and it's cured and we never have to think about it again. But it certainly gets better. And if we look at all the data, so like with methadone and Suboxone specifically, very widely used treatments for opioid addiction or opioid use disorder, this is exactly what we see, right? We see when people get onto treatment, we see reductions in death rates, we see reductions in arrest rates, we see increases in social engagement and healing those relationships. Now, it is true that if somebody's taking a medicine like Suboxone or methadone and then they stop taking them abruptly, they can have withdrawal symptoms. And I think this is part of what confuses people about addiction. Say, well, I'm addicted to the Suboxone or the methadone because I go into withdrawal if I can't get it. But remember, most of that definition of addiction is about, again, functioning and relationships and safety. There are these two little criteria about tolerance and withdrawal, but that's 2 out of 11 criteria. So it's definitely not the spirit of what this diagnosis means. So it's not replacing an addiction. I think it's treating it. I think that we can say that. Now, to address the issue of withdrawal, what I like to do is get a little silly when people kind of raise this. And I say, well, if just going into withdrawal means that you have an addiction, then I'm addicted to oxygen. Because when I don't get it, my body totally freaks out. and I feel like I'm not functioning well. It's a little bit silly, but I think it makes the point, because it would be ridiculous to say that we're addicted to oxygen, right? Even though we need it, our bodies need it to function. Just like they need water, we're not addicted to water either, and food. So I think as long as we frame it this way and remind people that what these medicines do is help improve function and help you live the life that you want to, consistent with your values. And if the addiction was taking you away from living consistent with your values, then it's hard to see anything bad about it. Even if there are side effects, even if there is a cost, even if there is the difficulty of going to a clinic. These are all real hardships, but still the benefits of the overall treatment, I think, are undeniable for the vast majority of people.
All right, Dr. Duhigg, thank you. Our next question is for Dr. Taneja, the Executive Director of Casa de Salud. Can you tell the audience the work you're doing to treat substance use disorders in our community? And are there different treatment models available? And can you explain what they are and how they work?
Thank you. My name's Anjali Taneja. I'm a family doc and addiction board certified doc, and the director of Casa de Salud, which is a nonprofit integrative primary care clinic in the South Valley of Albuquerque, and we're excited to be expanding to Los Lunas and Valencia County very soon. There are many ways to approach treatment for addiction, and community-based innovative models have existed and have potential to build upon. We have heard, I wasn't here all of the day and I regret that, but we have heard a lot about what problems exist and how this has been such a life-threatening and family-threatening epidemic. We've heard about ways to address the epidemic from all points of view, judicial, law enforcement, treatment, public health, and a lot of the ways in which evidence-based work has shown are often community-based models that offer or allow for treatment versus an abstinence-based model. Dr. Duhigg was talking about two really powerful medications for opioid use disorder, and Suboxone and methadone have shown a 50% reduction in opioid overdose deaths. And when I hear numbers like that, it's hard to even get into the philosophical idea of, are we substituting one addiction for another? We're not, but if we were, and we were reducing overdose deaths by 50%, we were winning. So medications for opioid use disorder are one of the most effective ways to help keep people alive. And once we can keep people alive, we can do all of the other things that we need to do. So just to address, in terms of stigma issues, we at this point really need to meet the moment. We are dealing with an epidemic that is producing cheaper and cheaper, easier to use synthetic drugs that I think at some point no amount of enforcement is going to get to the root of, because there's newer and newer ways to get opioids mixed with other substances, causing multiple issues for individuals and families and collectively for our whole community. So medications for addiction treatment, there's ways in which public health working together with treatment programs, working together with law enforcement or the criminal justice system can do incredible work. And right here in Bernalillo County, over years when MDC jail was being run by medical services that were out of state corporate for-profit services, we had many people dying of detox, which is not something you should die from. Over 25 people died in 3 to 4 years. We're very excited that UNM Hospital has come in and provide medical care at the jail, and that has been a result of advocacy at so many levels. And now there's partnerships with the jail, with UNM Hospital, with community organizations in community clinics to find ways to support people as they're coming out of jail. And over around the country, these kinds of partnerships have helped not only help people not overdose, because the rates of overdose when someone comes out of prison or jail are up to 40 times higher in that first week out than otherwise in the community. So help people not only reduce overdose deaths, but also help not go back to the jail for reasons that they should have, or often in times for reasons that may feel frivolous. There are opioid settlement funds available to New Mexico. In the county and the city have millions upon millions of dollars coming our way. So there are really creative ways that we can really think out of the box and see what works. We are really excited as Casa de Salud to be partnering with the Department of Health and Duke City Recovery Toolbox and Albuquerque Fire and Rescue, Bernalillo County Fire, and other organizations with this golden opportunity that has been talked about to help people post-overdose get directly to a clinic and treatment for care after being offered medications for opioid use disorder, specifically buprenorphine or Suboxone, right on the spot, right after an overdose. And in New Jersey, studies have shown that with programs like that, there's a 6-time higher retention rate for people sticking with a medication 30 days out from the overdose. And at Casa de Salud, in the last 6 months, our staff has helped reverse 3 overdoses in people who were overdosing in our parking lot or out on the county courtyard, which is adjacent to our clinic. This has never happened before, that we've even witnessed this. And we have been giving out Narcan since 2005, thanks to the Department of Health. But to see this many people overdosing, to have the opportunity to intervene in this way is really powerful. It's really emotional. It's really hard. It shouldn't happen. And we think about all the other people who are overdosing who don't have the help that they need. And I want to give a shout out to Delfino Rubi, our program manager for reentry care and case management, who on the last overdose did so much to help the person that we were supporting. I just want to name something in terms of community interventions for that also. All of our agencies are kind of doing the right thing to respond to overdoses. If someone calls 911, police shows up, secures the scene, and then emergency response shows up, supports the person with overdose beyond maybe the Narcan that the police gave or gives Narcan themselves, and then offer to take that person to the hospital. And that person can decide if they want to go or not. Beyond that, we have not had something really beyond that. So someone who has concerns with having police show up on them or is worried about what they could do might run from the scene after having Narcan. Or someone who doesn't want to go to the hospital doesn't really have other resources. And that person is then just left on this bench after they have basically died and come back to life. And we can do better than that, which is why I'm excited about the Golden Opportunity Innovation. But we can keep thinking out of the box and think about human-centered design. Like, what is the actual experience of an individual and their family members who are experiencing what it's like to have someone basically die and come back to life or not come back to life? And what can be done differently in the community? And what can be done differently with our public health agencies to have really powerful real-time data to help inform what we can do to help intervene in different ways? Because we're talking about massive surveillance and wildly expensive video data to track where fentanyl is coming in. What if we use that same money and technology to get really powerfully smart about our public health and community interventions? So that's a little bit all over the place, but jail coordination with public health, with emergency response, and with community-based, trusted, harm reduction-based, loving spaces are ways that we can really help meet the moment. And we really need to make sure that treatment is as accessible to community members as fentanyl is. And that's a very high bar to reach, and I think that we can do it.
Thank you. Such great information. I'm learning a lot today myself. This next question is for Dr. Warwick, who is the UNM board certified in medical toxicology, addiction medicine, and emergency medicine. The question is, what common social problems have grown with the use of fentanyl?
What problems in society hasn't grown, put it that way. And and I think I want to take this back to what Dr. Stern, Dr. Duhigg talked about when we look at what is the definition of addiction. And it's really, a lot of it is the consequences of our action and the need to go after or to satisfy a certain craving, or to escape a feeling. The longer I've been in people pursuing that start doing things they normally wouldn't. I don't know, I always kind of use the old example, the caterpillar and a butterfly are two very different things. They don't even look recognizable, but that metamorphosis of bringing people into treatment, when I have people in my patients who, when they're in treatment, they're very different than when they're not. And I think for those of us who have loved ones and family, we're seeing not only just a caterpillar, but we're seeing like the poltergeist out there. I don't know, it's Halloween, right? So flying around and doing that. And so I think those are where the societal problems come from. The other is, and I tend to be, I grew up in a small town, and when you call the police, you kind of have an expectation that somebody's going to help you out. A lot of the culture on this, especially on the street, is the complete opposite, where you don't call the police, you can't be a rat, and if you are a rat in your jail, you're gonna get stabbed or killed. This type of culture, that's stuff that we have that's coming out about this. A lot of, I think, our violent crime, two teenagers going for a drug deal, things that I know are gonna be at a drug deal: money, drugs, weapons. I mean, why would you show up to a drug deal with a knife? You don't bring a knife to a gun club, right? So, and what's not going to be there is police. And egos are what they are. Those are type of things that can rapidly escalate into a violent type situation. The other, and I'm just gonna, I could go on all day, but one that I find particularly disturbing is the imprint or the hope, and hearing from the panels this morning, is the children who are, their parents have a substance use disorder. And again, we go back to the definition where the parents are neglecting obligations to their child. At the same time, those neglected obligations become imprinting on the child's mind on what is normal. So in effect, what this is doing is affecting the next generation as well.
All right, thank you. Our next question is directed to Dr. Kavanaugh, the Assistant Professor of Psychiatry at the University of New Mexico Hospital. We're going to go back to that stigma topic again. How do you think it's impacting an individual's decision to seek treatment? And is there anything we all can do in our communities to reduce that stigma when we're interacting with others and we're hearing their stories?
Yeah, thank you for that question. If I step back and think about what that stigma is and kind of the lies that it's based upon in terms of an old unhelpful idea that addiction is a moral failing or failure of character, and the lie that people who use drugs are in some way different from people who don't use drugs, right? On a fundamental level. As a provider addressing this stigma, my first step is to acknowledge that it is a real phenomenon, that this is the lived experience of my patients, of these members of our community, that a lot of them, when they interact, when they try to seek treatment, have had multiple negative experiences with the medical system, right? That they've hit all these barriers, right? And by the time they're actually going into treatment and they persisted through all of that, it's an incredible act of bravery, and I need to acknowledge that. Then when we think about how to change it, right, we need to address both the source of the stigma. You know, if I'm thinking of treatment, we need to address it at the provider levels, at the training of physicians and nurses and medical assistants. You know, I do want to highlight how UNM now is making sure every single medical student is coming through our addiction substance use clinic, at least for part of their training and learning about how to address this stigma and work with these people like any other patient. And we need to grow that. We need to grow that into everything. And we need to make that more accessible and not think necessarily of addiction treatment as a separate population from, people getting their primary care visits and people getting, seeing a specialist. It's all going to be trying to help our population, right? Help our community. The other place where we need to address the stigma is kind of as people here in Albuquerque and New Mexico. I see so many patients come in who do take that act of bravery and come in for treatment there because their sibling or their parent or their cousin or their friend had a good experience getting treatment, right? And that's the best way. And I think ultimately the most effective way to address the stigma is us supporting each other, us talking to our family or friends. If we find out that they are seeking treatment, being as supportive as we can. And then also, if we can give information, making sure we're giving the best information available about what these treatments are, kind of what the path to recovery looks like.
Okay, thank you. This next question, we're going to open up to anyone on the panel who wants to jump in. What is being done to overcome the barriers of actually getting access to medication to treat substance use disorders?
I think we could probably go down the...
Yeah, you want
Yeah, you want to start with Dr. Duhigg?
Yeah, let's do
Great.
it. You start.
What is being done to address these
Yeah,
barriers?
being able to access the help.
It's a great question, and I think that there are a lot of different levels where we can identify where action is being done. Like I can talk about our clinic, the Duke City Recovery Toolbox. A couple of years ago, what we realized, so we are also a methadone clinic, and for folks who have not been in methadone clinics, to let you know, the standard around the country is that most methadone clinics open around 5 a.m. and close around noon or 1. Now, this is kind of by design, at least the early opening, because the idea is that so people can come and they can get their medicine and then like go to work or go to school or go watch their kids, whatever they need to do and still function. But it's a real problem if you can't get to the clinic before noon or 1, right? Because maybe you don't have transportation or your kids were sick or for whatever reason. And in most cases, that missed dose meant a high likelihood of relapse, right? Because people might feel uncomfortable and start to get sick and then find their own solution to make themselves feel better. So what we did is we extended our hours. We realized this is a problem that we can address. So now Duke City Recovery Toolbox, it's the only clinic in the state and bizarrely one of the only ones in the nation that is open during the day and at night. Right? It's not rocket science, really, but it is kind of hard to pull off. So we open at 5 a.m. now, and we don't close till 10 p.m. or 10:30 p.m. And it's awesome. And from the start, from the first week, so many people started showing up in the evening hours. And all of those would have been missed doses, right? Which means a also misstep, if you will, not their fault, in their recovery. And so this was a small, I think, change that we could do that did require a lot of a heavy lifting, right? It was kind of an ultra heavy lift because we have one patient population and now essentially we're operating 2 clinics. But it was the right thing to do for the community. And so ultra heavy need, ultra light kind of response. Not ultralight meaning bad, but just totally doable. Easy enough to do. And I think that thinking this way, so thinking differently about normal operations, is a really important way that a lot of us can address these barriers. Identify the barriers, remove them, and see what happens. And if that works, keep going. And if that doesn't work, try to identify another barrier and remove it.
That's so excellent. Nice. So one thing I wanted to just give a shout out to at UNM that I'm really excited to be a part of is our small but growing street medicine team. Since we know that the unhoused population has a higher prevalence of serious mental illness and substance use disorder, and even if we identify, a person in that population who could benefit from treatment, the idea of going across town in 2 weeks on a Tuesday morning at 10:30 for an appointment is just, it's a delusion. I mean, we want to set people up for success, and we want to remove these barriers. So going to the people, kind of following the advice of Dr. Withers and the Street Medicine Institute, go to where the people are, remove these barriers, have patient-centered care where the patients are, have low barrier access to things like buprenorphine. And if that moves into more continuity of care in a clinic, that's great. If not, we'll continue to work with them where they are. So there's some wonderful people on that team. I'm really happy to be a part of it.
There's so many barriers, unfortunately, but housing and transportation are huge barriers to people getting and staying in treatment. And again, unfortunately, with addiction, people's lives can get very off track, and they can end up unhoused, they can end up without transportation. We live in a city that doesn't have good public transportation. So again, appointments are set up, and folks have a really hard time getting to those appointments. Even if they've done the right thing and called for a medical ride, maybe it comes late. The other area of stigma and barriers is actually within the medical profession. It's at the pharmacies, where people who are getting treated are treated differently, like they're drug seeking, even though they're getting their medication that's life-saving for them, just as getting their heart medication would be life-saving and important. It can happen in physician offices where people are not seen if they're 5 minutes late, where again, we have to do not only training for, medical students, doctors, providers, we have to do training for the front desk staff and the medical assistants to understand about addiction, to realize that, again, addiction is a chronic disease. We do not kick our diabetics out of the clinic because they're not taking their medicine, or they're not exercising, or they're not, eating right. We don't. We just keep working with them. We take a deep breath and we bring them in, and we try and find ways to help them. The other thing we haven't talked about much is the chronicity of addiction and relapse. And we don't want people to relapse, but it happens. Again, diabetics, don't always take their medicine. We bring them back in. If they want to come in, it's okay, come back. We want to make it so that they want to come back. They remind them of how well they did, how much better they felt when they were in treatment. Things happen, and so let's, as a profession and as human beings, be kind and forgiving and encouraging to people who are trying to get better.
Just following up on what Dr. Stern just said, there's a lot in addiction that is related to emotional pain, and there's a lot in reinforcing addiction that's related to shame. So if we create systems where people are inadvertently shamed, even if we don't think that that's what's happening or we don't realize it in the moment, it's very easy for folks to go back to using. That's a coping mechanism. That's how someone is surviving the emotional and other structural situations that they're in. So much. Dr. Duhigg said, Dr. Kavanaugh, Dr. Stern, there's so much around what I keep calling human-centered design, like really understanding what, if you can get in the shoes of someone who is like finally ready to seek care and is like, I'm doing this, this is my window, and then just has all these doors shut on them, not because systems don't care, but the way that they're set up. So at Casa de Salud, we have a harm reduction syringe exchange in the clinic. So people all walk in through the same door. If they're like, I use these syringes, they might get clean supplies, not drugs, supplies that they can utilize to at least shoot more safely, to use more safely. That kind of relational, we're gonna meet you where you're at, and we wanna help. That relational experience can be really profound. We had a harm reduction client come to us after she left the hospital where she was there for many weeks with a very severe hip infection from having used and gotten bacterial infection that was seated there. And she came to us and she felt horrible, and she came and she was getting needles, and she realized over time, and she said to our team that you are treating me better than I treat myself, and that is what is going to make me now take this leap and be ready for treatment here. And that's a really powerful experience that has everything to do with that relational piece. Our ability as organizations, as county, as government, as city, to utilize peer support workers is a huge way to help overcome barriers, because peer support workers have been through it themselves, can be a peer to someone who might feel like no one understands what they're going through and understands what these barriers are. I mean, to be able to go to a clinic, not be seen because you don't have an ID, if you don't have health insurance, if you, have this small window where you're like, okay, I'm ready, and this window is gonna close in 24 hours, where you're just gonna shut it off because that's human nature, and someone can help you get in somewhere, that's huge. So in designing our spaces, it's incredible that we have methadone clinics that can be open all day. What a brilliant concept. Can we get folks in more quickly? All of our systems are likely working to figure out, someone's coming out of jail, they're right here, what can we do to help them stay in treatment or start on treatment? Someone is utilizing syringe exchange services. Someone is finally listening to their mom and saying, yes, okay, now is the time, I'm ready. How do we make sure that we have doors open and that we have resources available? I also very much feel like we have the opportunity to build a much more coordinated system here in the county. A centralized county hotline where we know exactly where different kinds of treatment are is really incredible. There's a whole system called New Mexico Leaders in Recovery where treatment programs, providers are on an email listserv together and work together to say, I've got someone with these specific issues, does anybody have an available bed, or they need this kind of counseling, and they work together in that way. And if we could do that for our entire population of folks and just make it easier when someone is ready, that would be really incredible. And I'm sure you all have many other ideas of how we could reduce barriers, but I will stop there.
Thank you. You know, it's always hard to follow up on a panel like this doing so many amazing things, and it's always, you want to feel that you want to feel empowered and you want to go out and do things. And I think one of the starting points is to recognize how far that we've come over the last 10, 20 years here. And I look at a variety of people in the room, things, Wayne, others who've done things. I know some of the things that I've been working on is getting rid of the X waiver training that was needed for buprenorphine. That took an act of Congress. And I wanted to start with that because I had written a position statement at a national level and got multiple professional colleges that was kind of a corner piece for congressional testimony. But you know, we overcome that barrier, and the best part I liked about this piece of legislation, it took time, but it was bipartisan support, which I don't think we always feel that we get in Washington. More recently, one of the things that Dr. Stern was starting to allude to is patients showing up at a pharmacy and not being able to get their prescription of buprenorphine or Suboxone because the pharmacy is out, and trying to track down and to be able to have conversations with DEA, to have with the governor's office, to have with our elected officials across the state, and to be able to say, no, this is more than just stigma. There is something going on. And so, to thank Senator Heinrich for introducing legislation here earlier this month to make an exception to the suspicious order reporting law so that we don't have these shortages. And I think we've heard from a lot of our elected officials here today on multiple panels. And so thank you for being here and the support and wanting to do it. And I think to want to congratulate all these people on the work that they're doing. Some of the work that I'm engaged in right now is trying to be able to meet people where they're at and to engage them. So we're working with hospitals primarily focused on rural hospitals across the state to get them up and comfortable with prescribing buprenorphine, or I would like methadone too, but it's just the access to methadone is more restrictive, and we do that through the New Mexico Bridge. So we'd like to thank this state opioid response grant. We've now been renewed for our 5th and 6th year for doing that. I've also positioned the New Mexico Poison Center to be able to take addiction calls, supporting physicians. Because again, my litmus test is I look beyond Bernalillo County, and my litmus test is somebody in Lordsburg, New Mexico, Cuba, New Mexico, or Clayton, New Mexico. How am I providing care for them? And so through the New Mexico Bridge, the Poison Center is taking addiction call, and I have been for almost 4 years now, to be able to do that. Over the last year, I've also been engaging with Justice Zamora, with multiple of the other, or a few of the other judges here on the panel, and providing the education from a health-based and an evidence-based to the judges. And I look back over my time here in New Mexico, and I think some of these conversations that we're having now, 10 years ago, I just don't think would have happened, or if they would, they just didn't have the sustain. But the power here, the fact that you guys are here, the interest in where you go from here, gives me great courage or a great belief that we're going to get somewhere. I know it feels like we've got a long ways to go, but I would suggest that we look at how far we've come over the last 10 years too.
Great, thank you. All right, this next question, I know many of us are eager to get some answers to. How do we talk to our kids about the use of fentanyl? I mean, I have a 13-year-old, and I'll get the eye roll of, I know, Mom, of course, Mom. But let's start with the elementary school level and then work up to middle school. How does the conversation change? What should we all be doing and when?
Sure. So Shelley, my son's 12, and I know we used to go to the same school. I've got the advantage that, living in this and talking about it when the opportunity comes. When my son was born, I did a lot with designer drugs and stuff, and while I was writing papers, he'd lay on my chest, and I'd be typing away or whatever, writing a paper and talk about it. And one of the things that I always try with my son is to talk about and they just come up. So we went on spring break and we went to the California Science Center, and they had a whole exhibit on human motivation. And so utilize that as something that, how does this motivation, how does this turn into addiction in the teaching? And it involved like a drawing of a color. And so now I have a talk where I actually put the drawing that he did, and he thinks it's kind of cool that his dad did some of that, is to empower. And one of the things that I always try to do is, when you're feeling sad and struggling with grief, is that's not a time. You'll feel better initially with an alcohol or another drug, but that's a really dangerous slippery slope, or some of the things that I do. And then people who have a substance use disorder try to provide a humanization and an understanding, and that they didn't get there with one drink, one use. This is part of the brain. And I know Dan's got kids too.
And then you can bring us home. So yeah, I have a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old. The 2-year-old, we don't talk about this, but with an 8-year-old just driving around Albuquerque, this is going to be a topic that comes up. And I think that humanizing, like prioritizing that, and it also making sure we're not dehumanizing, is something that applies at any age, at any level. And then the concepts that are really at the core of substance use disorder are going to be universal and goes across the lifespan, right? So the idea that we can make decisions that seem like a good idea now, not thinking about the consequences later, is something that I think any kid can understand, and that comes up whenever we're talking to somebody seeking substance use disorder treatment.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. We're fortunate that there is some science that I think can inform advice along these lines. And so I think of 3 main kind of things we can do when talking to kids. One is, if we're talking to kids, especially in our family, and if in our family we have a history, or we have people in our family who have substance use disorders. So we know that really the majority, slightly more than about 50% of your risk of developing an addiction comes from your DNA. And about 45% is environmental. It's a little bit more genetic than it is environmental, and it's even way more genetic for some specific substances. So I think when we have a family history, it is imperative that we talk to our kids about the risk in our family, right? In our family, this is a risk that we have to be aware of and we have to manage, we have to be mindful about. I think if we just try to ignore it and hope that it just won't happen to them, that's probably not going to lead to a place that we want it to. The other thing that we learned from some of the research actually totally surprised me. So a number of years ago, the results from some surveys were published where teens were actually asked to describe not only their views about the use of intoxicants or drug or substance use, but also what's behind those views. And this is what surprised me. Teens in these surveys actually rated that their parents' views on drug use and their parents' suggestions, for example, to not use, were more important to them or played a bigger role in their decision than their friends' opinions. That's what surprised me, because I assumed it would be the opposite. Because I was a teenager who thought all adults were idiots, right? As so many teens do. But it's not what the data shows. So teens actually do listen to adult family members when instilling some of these, what I would say maybe we should call values about in our family, do we use or not? And that is some of the recommendation. So to give that messaging, in our family, we don't use heroin, or in our family, we don't cope with chemicals, we learn how to cope. That's another important thing that we can do, is teach our kids how to deal with their emotions, which I think is something you guys said. The other thing, and this might feel weird at first, but that comes from the research, is that if we're gonna give advice, this is the current recommendation that we say to teens. We don't say when you use, or we totally think you should go experiment, right? But we need to accept that many teens will experiment. So instead, what the advice that we should give is if you are going to use, again, in our family, we think you shouldn't. This is not what we do. But if you are going to use or experiment, wait until you're 19. And that's what seems weird. It's not saying we think it'd be a really good idea that you totally experiment with drugs when you're 19, right? That's different. Instead, saying if you're going to experiment, just wait until you're 19. And this advice is totally just based on statistics. If we start to use intoxicants prior to age 19, we are more likely to develop a substance use disorder and addiction in our early adulthood, compared to if we start to experiment after 19. I don't think there's anything special or magical that happens when we turn 19, but this is what the statistics show. Certainly some people can start to experiment after age 19 and still develop an addiction or a substance use disorder. But the proportion of them is much lower compared to kids who start earlier. So that's really the advice. And try it on. It feels weird at first. And you can practice how you say it. If you're going to experiment, wait until 19. That is like evidence-based recommendation and advice at this point.
Oh, great. Another part of the question, what signs can parents look for? When you have a 13-year-old girl, for example, my girlfriends and I will talk about, you get the moodiness, or of course they have a bad day, they get overwhelmed at school, they're so involved, that sort of thing. But when does it become, so much more than that? Is it obvious? Is it not obvious? What do we need to be doing or open our eyes up to, maybe that we're not?
I don't have a great answer for that question. Because most of us don't want to see addiction. And I had a personal experience of my goddaughter living in my house, and she was drinking for a whole year, and I didn't see it. And there I was working in addiction medicine. Because we don't want to believe our children would be doing this. I mean, there are some of the signs of, not doing well in school and withdrawing and spending more time alone and stuff that everyone, talks about looking for. And I think most of it is trying to keep up communication with your child and trying to make it a safe, have a safety person, whether it's you or a friend or someone that they can confide in. I think part of the work is, again, helping children learn to deal with their difficult emotions, the anger and bullying and feeling left out and shame and just the hard unfairness of life. So again, teaching them better skills for how they can manage those things. Because if it gets overwhelming, everybody needs an out. We all need, time out. And for lots of people, they self-medicate with their emotional pain from whatever it is. And again, it doesn't have to come from a terribly abusive family. There are lots of other reasons that people have emotional pain. All of a sudden they're having a drink and it's like, hey, I'm not feeling this right now. It's such a relief in my brain not to feel so terrible about myself from whatever that feeling is. And so helping people finding a way, your children and yourselves and the people around you to talk about some of that and acknowledging the pain. What were they using the drugs for? How was it helpful to them? Because they're not going to be able to change that behavior or not go back to that if they don't have another outlet for it. And I think that's really important. And then the double stigma and shame of addiction that people have, so they feel so terrible about themselves all the time, that they've messed up their lives, that they've hurt their family. And the work that I do when I see somebody in the clinic is, I am so proud of you for coming in, that you showed up today, that you made that effort. And every time that they come back, and that as a society, we have to congratulate people for doing that work, for taking the, making that courageous first step to ask for help. So I think those are, that's again, the stuff you can do with them as a child. Life's not fair, but there are other ways to manage it.
Thank you. This question is for Dr. Warwick. Can you talk about xylazine for a second? What are the effects of it? What are the treatment protocols with it?
Yeah, all the weird drugs questions always come to me. So xylazine, I think, where do I want to start? So pharmacologically, it is an alpha-2 agonist. So it starts falling in the same category as clonidine, tizanidine, guanfacine, and basically it just acts to regulate outflow of neurotransmitters, primarily stimulants, centrally or in the brain. It's started showing up more on the East Coast a few years ago, and certainly has gotten a lot of press or publicity. We in New Mexico saw a peak of xylazine probably about almost 2 years ago now. And while it's still here in New Mexico, over 2024, the frequency that we've seen it, both at from primarily the crime lab. I wish Heather Jarrell or Dr. Jarrell was still here from OMI, but to the best of my knowledge, we've had no death from xylazine. And so I think the other question, so what does it do? Some of the off-label use, and we've used clonidine for years, decades really, to try to help decrease some of the symptoms or the feelings of the cravings and the withdrawal. I hypothesize that xylazine's probably in the drug supply to try to decrease some of the craving, the demand. But again, in New Mexico, contrary to what you might see in the newspaper, we're just not seeing much of it currently. And like I said, I don't know of any deaths that have been associated with it in the state.
Okay, thank you. Can anyone on the panel explain what polysubstance is? What do we need to know about that? Anyone's welcome.
Dr. Tanesha, I was wanting you to jump in. So polysubstance use disorder is, simply put, just multiple substances that have created a use disorder, right? So the thing that we're seeing a lot recently would be a combination of opioid use disorders, so the fentanyl that we're talking about today, along with a stimulant use disorder, primarily methamphetamine, which can interact in a lot of different ways, and you end up getting the complications and the difficulties from both. It doesn't have to be just those two, but that tends to be the trend that we're seeing. Both of which are treatable, but the treatment, if we have polysubstance use disorder, needs to incorporate both of those and kind of be a little bit more nuanced and personalized.
Thank you. Before we move on to some final thoughts, we'd like to open it up to the audience. Any questions, just feel free to stand up, raise your hand, and someone with a mic will come over your way. Right here?
It's a good question, and you're in a tight spot, right? With few resources, and you're kind of Johnny on the spot, right? It's up to you. There are no quick fixes for being in crisis, or just one kind of intervention or approach that will work for everybody. It sounds like, and there are probably more details to what you're experiencing, but some of the basics of crisis intervention probably can help in any situation, including this one, right? And I know it sounds like the basic stuff, but like us staying calm, right? Using that person's name, using our name, repeated messages that we're here to help, we're here to help, we're here to help, and then eliciting kind of what their needs are. These are some of the basic things. And you're probably doing those anyway. Is what you're describing people being upset about that they're being transported? Or are you talking about that people are maybe, because of meth and other things, they're psychotic and agitated? 100%. And Dr. Warwick is emergency medicine trained. I know he has some things to say, so we can give him the mic. But I do just want to recognize, so with all of that going on, I imagine it is also very overwhelming to you and your crew. And because there's so much need and so much going on, and kind of a feeling of maybe powerlessness about how to calm everything down. And so I'm very curious in what Dr. Warwick says in his advice, but I would also, I guess, put out the call for you and your crew to meet your own needs in that situation as well. Right, this idea that we put on our own oxygen mask before we help those around us on a plane. And same thing here, it's just that your situation is totally chaotic. And so all the more reason to have your own kind of internal practices about how to calm yourself in that crisis. But Brandon?
Sure. So I think the situation and the scenario that you're describing is really complex and is made much more difficult with a lack of time and energy. Number one is when you show up on the scene with this, oftentimes the police are involved. Not to villainize the police, but they're oftentimes very triggering to a lot of people. I have a family in town that kind of has me as, I'm not from here originally, but I count them as my adopted family. We've got a police lieutenant in the family, and we've got a convicted felon in the family. And, even having them being in the family, the person with the felony conviction is uncomfortable by being around the lieutenant, even though we don't care. And so when we have people who don't know each other, sometimes those can escalate things. The other is, I think we all want to help people, and putting people on the spot in the room. We've got the state EMS director in the room, and highlighting putting buprenorphine on the rigs, and I think that's such an important solution and part of it, because what are you going to do? You're going to transfer them to the ER, and I, as an ER doctor, am going to care for their mental health. And as an EMT, what's going to happen in the ER? They're going to be put in the back room. They're going to be drug tested, stripped naked, and given a gown, and sit there 12, 24 hours, and then see a psychiatrist, and who's then saying, well, here, we're going to change your meds and go home. And yet they've got their dog at home who's not taken care of, and other unmet needs. And you think the person and the human had a good experience there, and they're wanting to go back. And so again, I think, to Albuquerque Fire Rescue, to Santa Fe, and those who are looking at it, putting some of those additional resources on the rigs, get something like ACS show up where they have the trauma-informed care and things, can hopefully provide some of those care pre-hospital. My dream, and people on the panel know, is that I want also to be able for you to give a call to somebody who can start prescribing buprenorphine right then and there. And so we're looking at those things, but again, and when we convene next year, I'll update you guys on the progress, and I think we're going to be able to do that. So that's some of my thoughts on that, and it sucks, and I think it's recognition of a broken system.
Any other questions? Yes.
I had a question, and I think we need to wrap up soon, but okay. I did want to ask, I hear a lot that about medical assisted treatment, that sometimes I hear that there's a waiting list, there's a shortage. We heard again today in pharmacies, there's multiple barriers I've heard a little bit about today. Can we just rename any barriers, list them out? But also, I think I've heard from multiple of you in different spaces that sometimes I want to make sure that we also have the space where people who choose to get on medical assisted treatment aren't faced with stigma. Like I heard the youth panel saying, well, I hope I can get off. I know people that have been on methadone for 20 years, and they are okay with that. They're raising their grandchildren, and I don't want it to be a thing. Yes, if you want to wean yourself, great, but I also don't want it to be a thing that impedes somebody or still feels like they're like the moral failing piece, right? And last, I think it's Dr. Du here, but I heard this most from in other spaces, that sometimes just like any medication, Suboxone doesn't work the same for this person, or this buprenorphine meets somebody sick here, or methadone's better here. How do we get to the place where we can actually treat the individual, find them the thing that works for them? Because I don't want it to, again, to be a turnoff that, oh, this just didn't work or made me sick. So that's my last question.
So a whole bunch of different things there. One is, I think medicine hasn't stepped up for a variety of reasons, and we're having to change the culture of medicine, and having the easy access to care hasn't existed previously. And we're really trying to expand this. Number two is, I think the crux is in having family members and people who get together when they're ready and getting it. And I don't know, Amy Winehouse, her song Rehab, I don't know, just the line, no, no, no to rehab, and the frustration that's in it, and I want that system to be able to be available for people when they're ready. And I think some of our education as a community also needs to be focused on a positive reinforcement. It's the stick or the carrot, and beating our loved one into going to treatment is unlikely to have long-term benefits. And I know there's a lot of others who have comments.
I just think we have to keep working and keep getting the word out. There are lots of different options in different times. I mean, Bernalillo County's really expanded the care campus. There's the living room. People can come in and be in a safe environment, even if they're not ready to change yet, but have that space. Again, needle exchange places are great that way. There's the harm reduction collaboration that's also out there on the street, working with people right where they're at. And we do, I mean, those of us who are in practice, have to work to make sure that when people are in crisis, they're ready. Hopefully, again, getting a hotline number. I mean, there is the 988 number for people to call in a mental health crisis. But, if it's drug related, that there's a hotline they can call and start getting some comfort medicines called in, so that they're not feeling so alone when they're so far away.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we wrap up with our panel? A whole bunch. Let's go right here. I saw you first. Go ahead.
Oh, I had the mic, so I'll give it to her if she's ready, right here. You ready? Okay.
Thank you. Carrie Beam from the big city of Cuba, small business owner, educator, public relations professional. One thing that I've been hearing throughout all of the panels is funding. One thing that I'm hearing throughout all the panels is loss of job. We also have workforce issues, especially in rural communities. This issue rolls into all these great restaurants that we have in town, and no one wants to wash dishes. I hear human-centered design, which is a term from engineering and innovative entrepreneurship and business leaders. What if this room were filled with entrepreneurs, engineers, social engineers, capitalists, people with the funding, people with the access to innovation, resources to try to solve this problem? Because I feel like all of this discussion is preaching to the choir. Everyone that shows up to these forums are living it, and we are nonprofits, we are teachers struggling, we are providers not being backed up. Like, we need this to be an economic engine. We need to apply business solutions to this very big problem. And when you see that art therapists, addiction therapists, child development specialists, middle school teachers, those degrees are in the list of the 20 most underpaid professions. Why would anybody want to go to school and start working on these problems when they're not getting paid for it? And then we have the schools saying we don't have the providers and the counselors to go in and work with our children. So I just am like challenging everyone here to think about that, because this is not just social services. I mean, this affects our economy, and if New Mexico wants to be #1 in business and innovation, and we have Intel and the national labs, I mean, we're not practicing what we preach here. We have to do more and involve those leaders on that business and economic development front. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for another question or? Okay, I think we need to wrap up. I could go all day. I want to thank our panel for being here today. You guys shared so much valuable information we can all take back to our friends and family. So on behalf of everyone, I thank you.
Yeah, and thank all of you.
We were agreeing that we could go another hour, but we want to respect people's time. It's been a long day, so much good information. The county has held 2 economic sessions with business leaders. Those are online too. Let's continue to make those robust and what we need to address our communities. So we have one last closing. I'm excited to have our wonderful Gilbert Ramirez, Deputy Director of Health, Homelessness and Housing, I think anyways, the City of Albuquerque, top guy, and our own Bernalillo County, Dr. Wayne Lindstrom, top guy. He is saying time out. Wherever you all want, but I thought right here. Thank you. And they're going to do our closing remarks. These are the folks that are really making decisions about our services in our city and county, working collaboratively. So I'm very thankful for their presence here today. Please give them a warm welcome and our closing remarks.
Well, it's been a long day, and if you're like me who attend a lot of the sessions, I'm very moved. I have to go home and kind of decompress. So much shared in the workshops and in the and just powerful. The morning started off really intense and closed the same way. Extremely appreciative. My name is Gilbert Ramirez. I am the Director for Health, Housing, Homelessness, City of Albuquerque. We've been working in collaboration with the county to be able to bring this forum, but we've been doing this for a while. And so I think closing remarks for me, honestly, is just that today really continues to mark that there's a movement being created in our community to be able to change the direction and path that we're headed on. And, I grew up in a Mexican family with a lot of Spanish, and my mom always used to have dichos, which are like sayings that would guide the work that we do, right? And she had a saying for everything, like, if I was hanging around with the wrong people, always, dime con quién andas, y te digo quién eres. Tell me who you hang out with, and I'll tell you who you are. And I'm like, Mom. Well, one that she used to say is, querer es poder. To want is to do. And I think this started with that very premise early on, that there was a group of folks who said, we want this to happen and we're gonna do this. And so this is the fruit of that. And we owe a lot of gratitude and thanks for that. The last piece is really, entre dicho y hecho hay un gran trecho. So between what we say and what we do, there's a big gap. And so there's a lot of work to be done. In 2018-19, when I came on board with the city, I remember consulting with our legal attorney team on the strategy we were going to use to take to the pharmaceutical lawsuit around opioid epidemic and crisis in this country to stage our fight. I like to say that we staged that fight. We won in a way, and we have received about 1/3 of the appropriations of the dollars that we should get from that settlement, which is about $27.5 million just for the city alone. And of course, the county has their portion. When we leverage those dollars together, we can now start looking at implementing and leveraging resources and programming that's absolutely crucial for our community to move forward. So earlier it was said that's roughly $50 million in which we have worked with a collaboration with Vital Strategies. Jointly, the city and the county passed resolutions to make sure that we work together to see how we leverage those dollars. So I loved in the morning panel that we were uplifted with a message of hope from a father and a son who talked about the recovery path and where they are. I hope to be able to say that our commitment to make sure that that funding goes into areas that can leverage dollars and address gap services, which we've heard a ton of today, and bring on more services and lower barriers to access. That's our goal, right? It's not easy work, and I am committed to it so long as I'm a part of this administration and I hold this role. I feel that I'm honored to be able to do that. I've been serving this community as a licensed clinician for the last 24 years. I've been honored to do so, and my heart and my passion is in this. If I'm doing it wrong, then they can tell me to leave, but my goal is to honor, uplift. All the sessions that I sit in and hear, someone's listening. I hope you know that. And we all are in a place of influence and change. And I hope to carry that forward and be able to continue to fight that fight so that we're going to bring the resources that are needed to address this. It's going to be a long path, right? The path of recovery, it isn't an end place. It's a journey, right? And we know that it can be cyclical. There can be challenges where you end up with relapse or you fall back and then you need an extended hand. So many wonderful stories around saying, you know, my wife's fighting a battle with cancer. Her treatment's a lot different than somebody who's facing addiction. It seems like there's a little bit more warmth, a little bit more compassion, a little bit more willingness to be able to coordinate that care. I know COVID kicked our butts, and I know there's some compassion fatigue that exists in our community. People are exhausted, people are tired. But it is this community that will keep fighting despite that I believe that we can be able to carry forward changes, bring services that we need, and really move in a positive direction. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say, you know, Lisa has been hand in hand, Deputy County Manager over here, working on this, and her commitment to this cause and really driving us just deserves recognition and my thanks. There's been times where, yes, all those things. There was no way she'd take no for anything, and she was persistent, and the texts and the calls and making sure, and she was very understanding and patient because we all have busy jobs, but here's the commercials, here's the next ad, have you guys seen this? And then, of course, making sure that we had youth represented here, people with lived experience. So my thanks to you for that, and it's been an honor to be a part of this. Thank you all for coming, and I apologize too, because I've got a daughter who I want to be present for too, that I need to go to, but again, thank you, and please know our commitment is there to be able to continue this work, and I'm appreciative just to be a part of it. Thank you.
Well, it looks like our ranks are thinning. Thank you, Gilbert, and I want to echo what you said about Lisa's leadership in terms of keeping New Mexico alive, because when you come down to boiling everything down that we've heard today, ultimately that's what this is all about. Gilbert and I were asked by Lisa to kind of wrap things up for the day, and as you've heard at various points in time, New Mexico is going to receive something like $1 billion over the next 10 to 18 years. And the from the opioid settlement funds. And whether it's that amount or it's something else is still up in the air, because the reality is that the Sackler family, which is the owner of Purdue Pharma, the manufacturer of OxyContin, agreed to the settlement and is now challenging it in court. And so we don't know whether the amount that they've been held or they agreed to in the settlement will still apply, or whether or not it'll be reduced by some amounts of money. But in addition to that, there are also suits still going on that have not been settled. So what the ultimate amount will be is still very much up in the air. Each state has had their own plans around how to plan for the expenditure of these funds. And the amount that we currently have, when I say we, the county, is in the neighborhood of 24 million. And the city is closer to 28, 29 million. And we have signed a memorandum of understanding. This was done before I came on board in May, something like back in January, around working together around the expenditure of these funds. And the decision was made to contract with Vital Strategies, which is an international consulting firm, and they received $10 million from the Bloomberg Foundation to work with 7 states around strategic planning in terms of how to best spend these monies. We have reviewed a couple of different drafts now of that plan, and we're scheduled within, about a week, Gilbert, to present before the, what used to be known as the ABCGC, which is now the Local Government Coordinating Council. And Vital Strategies will be doing that presentation very soon as we sign off on the draft. We had a number of revisions that we proposed to make the recommendations, I think, more meaningful to the dynamics here. And there will be subsequent presentations before both the City Council as well as to the county commissioners. So that's going to be kind of our blueprint on how we move forward. I've seen a lot of strategic plans developed, some of which have been extremely well done, and some not so much. But too often I've also seen strategic plans get developed and a lot of time and energy being spent on community input. And we had a great deal of community engagement on this strategic plan. And I would like Cindy Sackman to stand up because she deserves a round of applause for overseeing all the town halls, the surveys, the voices sessions, which were really small, intimate focus groups, a lot of whom were people with lived experience. And that's all integrated into this plan as well. While we're engaged in this initiative for Bernalillo County and for the city, the state formula is that they get 45% of New Mexico's funds, and counties and municipalities get 55%. The state, in House Bill 2 in the last legislative session, outlined what the state is intending to do with their money. It took a bit of assertive massaging, if you will, to learn necessarily what the state was doing, because we were concerned that we don't want the state going down one road and we plan on going down the same road and we end up duplicating a lot of things and tripping over each other, et cetera. But I can say that when I finally saw the allocations for the state's dedication of these funds initially, that they're doing things that are primarily their responsibility. And just to give you a high-level example of that is for the first time, we're going to have medication-assisted treatment in our state correctional facilities. And, MDC took the leadership on this a good many years ago, if you will, and the state has been lagging behind, quite frankly. So that kind of initiative is an initiative at the state level that's highly appropriate. It's outside of our domain. So I'm really pleased to see those kinds of developments there as well. We want to be sure that this isn't a strategic plan that sits on a shelf and just gathers dust, as many often do. I'm a big believer in implementation planning. And so we want to be able to do some implementation planning once we have this strategic plan adopted by both the county and the city, and have some really targeted action planning around what are the goals and objectives, who's responsible for delivering them, what are the timelines, so that we can, in fact, track the progress and be able to report back to all of you in the general community on how we're spending this money to better fill the service gaps and better meet the needs. I'm a big believer that this is an opportunity for us to get upstream of these issues. We've had a lot of discussion today around treatment and interventions, and harm reduction is a form of prevention, but I want to see us do more primary prevention. You heard, some of you at least heard the youth panel up here earlier today in talking about what was going on in their lives, the traumas that they experienced before they even began using. And so we know a lot about building protective factors in kids. We have a lot of evidence-based primary prevention methodologies. And so I'm hoping that one of the things that comes out of this is that we're not always dealing with these problems late in one's life trajectory, but begin much earlier in preventing these problems from developing in the first place. So I think this is an exciting time. I often say it's the perfect storm. We have more high-level awareness across all sectors of our community about behavioral health. That wasn't the case when I started in this field over half a century ago now. We have more resources than we've ever had before, but unfortunately, simultaneously, we have far more demand. We are increasingly a society in despair, and there's a lot more that we need to do to be better connected to one another and build a sense of community and belonging so that despite however technologically connected we are, we don't remain so disconnected from one another that I think is a major contributor to everything that we've talked about today. So with that, I don't know if you have any closing remarks, Lisa, you want to make?
So it's been a long day. I'm Lisa Cedillo-White. I'm one of the deputy county managers for Bernalillo County. So I just wanted to close with thanking each and every one of you for dedicating your time to being here today. I hope that you left with understanding, education, awareness. We had so many experts here today sharing. And so our campaign, we're going to keep moving forward to keep New Mexico alive. And so I want to thank all of our partners, the City of Albuquerque, of course, Bernalillo County, Albuquerque Public Schools, and Santa Fe County, and all of the providers that were here today. I also want a special thanks to my staff, and all of the volunteers from Bernalillo County and the City of Albuquerque that made this happen. There was a lot of planning that went into it, and a lot of people dedicating time. So we will continue to provide education and awareness to our community on ways to keep New Mexico alive. So you all have a safe travels home, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you.